Welcome to Dr. Creepen's dungeon. Monsters terrify us because they embody the parts of reality and ourselves that we can't easily explain or control. They twist the rules of the natural world, breaking the boundaries we rely on to feel safe. A monster is fear made flesh, the unknown given teeth, the uncanny given shape, the impossible given intent. Whether they lurk in the woods, crawl from the dark, or hide behind a familiar face, monsters remind us that danger might not just exist. It might be hunting, as we shall see in tonight's collection of stories. Now, as ever, before we begin, a word of caution. Tonight's tales may contain strong language as well as descriptions of violence and horrific imagery. That sounds like your kind of thing. And let's begin.
Bloodsuckers. The college senior suspects that vampires are behind the recent disappearances, but his roommate is too busy with his girlfriend to pay attention, so he decides to solve the mystery by himself. October had arrived. The wind had a hint of the approaching winter. The days had started to fall short. People had not yet started to react to this change, but the sun went down as early as 5 o'clock, and it was almost at the horizon that day when Ahmed, Vikram and Nina were sitting in a restaurant killing their time. Ahmed Qureshi and Vikram Singh were college seniors, roommates and best friends, and they were going to be graduates that year. Nina Kravosos was Vikram's girlfriend. She wasn't from college. Vikram had met her in a club that Ahmed had taken him to. Vikram was an orphan. He'd managed to get a scholarship to go to college, but there was no way he could afford a livelihood like that, but Ahmed always forced him to come with him. He had his parents' money, so he didn't care. He just didn't want to be alone. At first, Nina was not so interested in Vikram, but the fact that he was an orphan brought them together. Nina didn't have a father. She lived with her mother and aunt. That bonded Nina and Vikram together very soon. Ahmed always just tagged along. All three of them enjoyed each other's company, and they were talking about the upcoming Halloween party. "So, who are you two going as?" Nina asked in her squeaky voice, flipping her shiny dark hair and looking at Vikram and Ahmed with her small black eyes. "I haven't decided yet. I still have my costume from last year. I'll trade it off with someone," Vikram replied in his heavy voice. He sat right beside Nina. "No, you are not," Ahmed interrupted. "You're not wearing someone's old costume. We're going shopping next Sunday." "Why? It's just for one night and everyone's going to be too drunk to notice anyway," Vikram argued. "Yeah, I mean, it isn't just like every day for you guys. You guys are drunk after sundown anyway. This one evening you're going to be in costumes. I mean, it's Halloween," Nina added. "Oh, you take that back." Ahmed pretended to be offended. "What?" "Oh, you hurt his feelings. Halloween night is probably his favorite night," Vikram said, smiling. "He's into ghosts, horror, and stuff like that." "Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is Vikram is right. No, he doesn't say it. He doesn't like it when you spend too much money on him. It makes him feel like he's in your debt." "What? Come on, man. You're not in debt. You don't have to pay me back. You're my brother. But, okay, I get it." "Oh, well, that's settled. Yeah, I wish I could come to the party," Nina said hopefully. "Maybe you can," Ahmed replied. "Are guests allowed on campus?" "Oh, no, but we can sneak you in." "Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to be dressed. Nobody will find out," Vikram added. "You guys sure?" Yeah, don't worry." "Okay, great." Nina looked at her watch and turned to Vikram. "Oh, we should get going." "Already?" Vikram asked. "Where are you guys going?" asked Ahmed. "We've decided to have dinner with Nina's parents." "He means my mom and my aunt. My two moms." "Yeah, they're your parents, sweetheart. Come on, let's go, shall we?" They paid the bill and walked out of the restaurant. It wasn't very cold, but still it made Vikram shiver even though he was wearing a jacket. Ahmed was wearing a long-sleeve shirt, but still he put his hands in his pockets to shield them from the cold. I might be late, Vikram started. Yeah, I'll leave the door unlocked, and don't worry, I'll probably be awake by then, Ahmed interjected. Oh, please don't waste your time on these chat rooms again, Vikram said. What chat rooms? Nina asked. She was listening in. I want to be Detective Ahmed here. Waste his time chatting with others like him trying to solve unsolved cases. What? That's, Yeah, I know, right? Some of them even believe that they're a vampire. Vikram, can I talk to you for a moment? Ahmed dragged Vikram aside. Listen, I know you don't take this seriously, but it's not a joke. Okay, I'll admit some of these people are crazy, and there's probably nothing unnatural going on, but those disappearances are real. I'm worried. So, don't walk alone, okay? Take a cab. Here, keep this money. Ahmed tried to hand him a few hundred, and Vikram made a face that reminded Ahmed of what Nina had said earlier. Come on. You're my brother. Take care. Remember, don't walk, take a cab. And he waved goodbye to Vikram and Nina, and came back to his room in the campus dormitory. The very first thing he did as he entered was the same thing that Vikram had told him not to do. He switched on his computer and logged into the chat room. As expected, a discussion was already going on. He scrolled up to read some of the unread messages. Most of them were just greetings and unimportant. A few of the important ones read, So, how do they survive subtropical cities like ours? Oh, maybe they've adapted to this climate. It's not like they have to come out in the sun. They could just stay hidden. Right, and if they're masquerading as humans, they'd probably be doing it at some place more similar to their natural habitat, like an ice cream factory or any other place like that. Makes sense. If there are many of them, they could all easily cover for each other. Ahmed read all those messages, and they made him furious. He typed, Hey guys, so you've straight up established that vampires are behind these disappearances. I mean, it could be a serial killer. It could be an underground network harvesting human organs. We have to look into every possibility. You guys are just making up stories to thrill yourselves. Someone replied to Ahmed, I thought we already discussed that. Someone else added, We are looking at every possibility. Right now we're discussing this one. And the messages kept on coming one after another. Ahmed read silently for a minute. And the FBI did find some bodies early on, and they were intact. I know it could still be a serial killer, but there's no underground network harvesting human organs. Yeah, my dad's in the force. He said even the blood was removed surgically, with a syringe and all. At that, Ahmed quickly typed in, So, if they are vampires, can't they just directly suck the blood from the victim's body? Why would they use a syringe? Isn't it clear? They want to throw the police off their trail. God, are you even thinking? Someone replied. Are you? Ahmed typed again. Why would they care about that? The police at most would think it was done by some animal. They don't know about vampires. They do, the kid whose father was in the police replied. My dad said there's a rumor that some people in the department know about that stuff. He said they're a hidden organization or something, which asks these people to work on these cases. But it's just a rumor. Even I don't believe it. Hey, you said police found some bodies. Where did they find them? My dad said they found them by the river in the old city. They must have washed up on the shore. Yeah, old city. That's the perfect dumping ground. They probably don't even have to throw them in the river. Nobody could find a body in those streets, even if it started to smell. Wait, there's no factory in the old city, is there? No, Ahmed replied. Some small-scale setups, but no factory. Guys, we're getting nowhere with this. We need more information, more clues. I have an idea. Why don't we go look by the river? There must be some clue or evidence. What do you guys say? I'm on board. We'll finally meet up. I'm not sure, but we gotta do something. Ahmed waited a few seconds, and then he typed in. Yeah, Okay, let's do this. They all decided to meet up next Saturday and look by the river for clues. Ahmed went to bed about half an hour before Vikram came back. He was still at Nina's place finishing up his dinner. "Thank you for the delicious food, Mrs. Krovosos," Vikram said to Nina's mother just before leaving. "Oh, no, thank you for coming," she replied. "It was lovely to meet you." Nina's mother was probably in her 40s, but she still looked just as young as Nina, and so did her sister, Nina's aunt, who looked at Nina and said, "Nina, I love this boy, even though he didn't take his jacket off after I asked him 3 times. I wanted to see his biceps." At that, Vikram's cheeks went red. "Oh, they're not great. I don't work out, and I didn't feel like taking my jacket off. I wasn't feeling that hot." "Oh, of course you weren't. You were sitting with Nina. You should have sat next to me." And she laughed her lungs off. "Okay," Nina's mother started speaking. "It was a wonderful evening. You should come more often. What are you doing Saturday nights?" "Nothing." Nina spoke up before Vikram. "Perfect. Nina, honey, bring him home on Saturday." "Okay, done." Well, Vikram couldn't handle that amount of love. He'd grown up in an orphanage and wasn't used to this. He could barely speak up. Thank you, Mrs. Krovosos. I can't say..." "Mom, help him." "Oh, don't mention it, dear. Now you should head back. It's getting late." Then Vikram said goodnight to everyone, promised to come on Saturday, and left. The moment he left, Nina hopefully looked at her mother and her aunt. "So, what do you think?" Nina's aunt hopped to her feet, clapping her hands. "Oh, he's perfect. I love him." The next morning, Ahmed got up early. He was making coffee when he saw Vikram's bed was empty, though it looked like he'd slept there. Ahmed was just wondering where he'd go so early in the morning when Vikram walked in, still sleepy and with a handbag which was probably Nina's. "Oh, where have you been to?" Ahmed said, looking at the handbag. "Oh, it's Nina's. She left it at the restaurant yesterday. My phone was in there too," Vikram replied. He put the handbag on the table right next to the entrance and went back to his bed and fell onto it, and within minutes he was snoring. Ahmed took his cup of coffee and switched on the computer again. He logged into the chat room and found a few more unread messages. He started reading them while drinking his coffee. "Hey, did someone say the police have found some bodies? Do we know who they were?" "No, the police couldn't identify them, but they looked like they were homeless people living on the streets." "Ah, that's perfect. Whoever's behind this, they're targeting people whom nobody will miss, nobody would look for. Yeah, they're taking the poor homeless or orphans. We don't even know how many they've taken already." "Well, maybe we'll find something on Saturday." "Yeah, see you guys then." When it was time to go to college, Ahmed switched off the computer and went to get ready. Vikram woke up and got ready too. They both left for college together. In the evening, Ahmed was again on the computer, but nobody had come online or left any messages. Vikram, who was out, came back, so Ahmed quickly switched the tab. "Hey, what's up?" Ahmed asked. "Nothing," Vikram said exhaustively, and plunged into a chair. "I was waiting for you. I got you something." Ahmed picked up a package and threw it towards Vikram, who caught it and began opening it. "What is it? Did you get me a costume already?" "No, we're going to go for that on Sunday, remember?" Vikram opened the package and saw a pair of blue sneakers fall out. "What?" "I was feeling bad about you losing your shoes that night, so I got you a new pair." "You didn't have to. Those were already worn out. I was going to buy a new pair anyway." "Well, now you don't have to." "Thanks, man." "Yeah, and you don't have to pay me back." "I know. You think I can't appreciate a gift?" "Okay, then. Come on, I'm starving. Let's go eat." When Saturday arrived, most of the students had left for the holidays. The Festival of Lights was approaching, and only a few of them had stayed for the Halloween party, and Ahmed and Vikram were among them. Ahmed logged into the chat room every day, but no one else had said anything. They were all offline since the last time. Ahmed was furious. They were all just pretending to be worried about the disappearances, wanting to solve them. They must have left for the holidays too, bailed on the chance that they'd got. That evening, Ahmed was sitting in the room thinking about going to the river alone, when Vikram walked in. "Dude, put on a shirt. Nina's coming." "So what?" "Nothing, it's not good manners." Ahmed put on a shirt. "Hey, Nina," Ahmed said as soon as she walked in. She was wearing an overcoat, but her heels implied that she must have been wearing a dress underneath. "Hey, what's up there?" "Oh, hi, sweetie," said Vikram and pecked her on the cheek. "Here's your handbag." "Oh, thanks, and can I borrow your phone? Mine's dead again." "Again? Did you try charging it sometimes?" Vikram said, playfully handing over his phone. "Okay, here. You go ahead, I'll be right there. I just have to wear the shoes." Ahmed, who was waiting for Nina to go out, looked at Vikram mischievously. "Oof, someone's going to be lucky tonight." "Nothing like that. I'm having dinner with her family," Vikram replied while putting on his new sneakers. "Oh, you poor guy. I don't want to leave you alone for the holidays, but that's the only way you'll have the room to yourself." "Don't worry about it. Besides, I like her. I don't want to rush." "Okay, see you later." Vikram waved goodbye and walked out. Little did he know that he would never see Ahmed again. "Let's go," he said to Nina, who was waiting for him outside. "Wait, you got your handbag and my phone, right?" "Yeah," Nina said, patting the pocket of her overcoat. Ahmed was just waiting for Vikram to leave. He quickly dressed and left the room. On his way out, he saw Nina's handbag on the table. "Ah, that girl is dumb as hell," he said. "It's a good thing she's pretty." He reached the river in the old city. It was dark, which hadn't been his plan, but he had to wait for Vikram to leave. He started walking in the mud. Well, it looked like a waste management site. There was so much garbage it was impossible to see anything, especially in the dark, and the stench almost made him throw up. He kept looking in the light of his phone's flash. He was also scared. If it was the dumping site, there was a slight chance that whoever was behind all this could show up to dump another body. He soon realized that one person couldn't look through the miles of garbage alone, but he didn't realize that he wasn't the one in danger, even though he was scared. No, the one who wasn't scared at all and was in grave danger was Vikram. He was sitting on the couch with Nina in her living room, while her mother and aunt were in the kitchen preparing the dinner. Nina was playing with Vikram, who was a little nervous but was still responding. "Are you sure we can't help them?" he asked. "Don't worry about it," Nina replied, pulling herself closer to him, and before Vikram could say anything else, she kissed him. Well, Vikram was worried that her mother and aunt could walk in on them at any second, but after a few seconds of Nina's lips passionately pressing against his, he gave up. Nina was now nibbling in his ear. She made her way down his neck, on his left side, and Vikram felt an intense wave of pain spreading through his body from 2 fresh wounds on his neck. Then he screamed. Vikram tried to scream, but no sound came out. He was out of breath. He tried to stand up, but he couldn't move his muscles. Nina then let go of his neck, and Vikram saw her face. She had been completely transformed. She was staring at Vikram with her red eyes, with elliptical pupils, and was flickering her forked tongue. Vikram felt a wave of terror travel through his body. That was the last thing he felt because his whole body then went numb. Nina saw this and smiled. She knew that her prey wasn't going anywhere now. She turned her head towards the kitchen and hissed. Her mother and aunt came, flickering their tongues. One of them, Vikram couldn't tell which one, pushed a needle into his vein. He saw blood running out of his body through a tube with the corner of his eye. He didn't feel anything and certainly couldn't do anything to stop it. He was just praying that someone would come and save him, but there was nobody to save him. He soon started to lose consciousness. "It's almost done, sweetheart," Nina began. "I know you must be thinking what's happening right now. Perhaps you should have listened to your friend." Vikram couldn't see anything. Darkness had filled his vision and his mind. He could only hear Nina's voice, which felt like it was coming from afar. She was laughing. "Oh, it's been a long time since we had a good meal. I mean, those malnutritioned homeless scum, barely any blood in their bodies. We had to take extra care with your case. That damned phone of yours could have gotten us in trouble. I had to make sure you could never bring that thing here. I had to lose my favorite handbag for it, but it was worth it." The remaining blood and life drained out of Vikram's body soon enough. The last thing he could think of was Ahmed. He hoped with his dying breath that maybe he would figure it out somehow, that he would do something, but Ahmed had no clue. That night when Ahmed returned to his room, Vikram still hadn't come back. He thought that maybe Vikram was staying at Nina's. The next morning Ahmed tried calling him, but found out that he'd left his phone there in Nina's handbag. He waited all day for him to return. When night approached, he started getting worried, and by Monday morning when he was sitting in the police station, he realized that he might never see his friend again. The police couldn't find him. They tried looking for a girl named Nina, but they couldn't find anyone. They also tried tracing Vikram's location history by his phone, but the phone had never been to Nina's place. The case turned cold just like all the other cases of disappearances. The police weren't even convinced that anything had happened to Vikram. Who was to say that he hadn't just left everything behind to start a new life? After all, he wouldn't be the first orphan to do so. Ahmed didn't go home for the holidays. He spent his days and nights scrutinizing the riverside. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't think about anything else except that if he'd just been a little more cautious, if he'd just paid attention, he could have saved his friend. It was all his mistake. He wanted him to get away so he could play the little game of investigation, his fantasy. He was now sure that there weren't any vampires in the city. How could he have thought something crazy like that? He knew that his best friend must have fallen prey to the foul ways of the crime world. There was nothing he could do about it. After about 2 weeks, Ahmed was finally ready to go home. There were still a few days left for the festival, and his parents had kept on insisting. He agreed to go just because he didn't want to be alone. He was just wandering by the riverside. He was leaving the next day, but he couldn't stop himself from going there one last time. He was just walking aimlessly around when he spotted something in the pile of garbage. He jumped at it. It was now literally rolling in the mud, but he didn't care. It was stuck in the mud. Ahmed dug around it and pulled it out. And when he realized what it was, he started crying. Tears streamed from his eyes. The pain was unbearable. He was wailing like a wounded animal. He picked it up in his mud-covered hands and kept looking at it with tears in his eyes. It was a blue sneaker. The Kravosos family. Arjun tries to solve the mystery of bloodless bodies, which everyone at first thought was the work of vampires, but turns out to be something else. It was a serene night, calm, peaceful and lonely. It was a beautiful night to go out. There was no traffic or pollution, no honking of the loud horns, no smoke polluting the air. It was a fresh, healthy and clear night. It was a night to take a walk on a lonely, long road, dimly lit by dingy streetlights and the clear sky filled with hundreds and thousands of stars, twinkling as if they were giggling. It was a lovely, romantic night. "Oh, I had a great time tonight," said Nina, who was half drunk and was leaning on Raj's shoulder. Raj was looking at both of Nina's stuffed-into-high heels feet to make sure she didn't trip or something, and was talking to her. "Me too. Thank you for walking me home. Well, I wasn't going to let you walk by yourself. They were walking to Nina's home after a dinner date. They had met each other in a bar just a couple of days ago. Raj was a businessman. He ran a small business in Metro City, and he was really handsome and quite wealthy, but that wasn't the reason why Nina had decided to go out with him. No, Raj lived alone. He'd walked out of his parents' house after they'd had a huge fight. He'd never tried to contact them after that, nor did his parents. He'd been living all by himself for the past 5 years. Well, he rarely made any friends, and that's why Nina chose him. Nobody knew that Raj was out on a date tonight. Nobody Raj worked with knew anything about a girl named Nina, and, most importantly, nobody would look for him if he went missing tonight. A few days later, Dr. Gautam Vishwas was about to finish his shift in the mortuary. He was writing the report on the post-mortem examination of the body of a young man that was discovered the day before near the riverbank. It was late at night, and there was rarely anyone there. The doctor was busy in his work when somebody entered the office. It was a man, tall, square-faced, with small eyes, wearing a blue-green-white checkered shirt and jeans with leather shoes. The doctor stopped working and looked at the man, who walked up to his desk. He was about a foot taller than the doctor because he had to lift his head up to make eye contact. "Dr. Vishwas?" he asked. Yes, who's asking?" The doctor wasn't sure if he was an official because, honestly, he didn't look like one. The man had a very kind but soothing, strong voice. "Name's Arjun. I've come from the library to, It's okay. We're alone. You can talk." "Oh, good. Mansi sent me." Arjun seemed relieved. "Yeah, she called. Come with me." The doctor took Arjun to the morgue. As they entered, the cold prompted Arjun to go for his salt bomb, but then he realized it was just normal cold. He looked away to try and hide his embarrassment, but the doctor wasn't even looking. He was busy putting on gloves, and then he pulled a body out. It was Raj, pale, cold, and dead. "Male, 27, been dead for a few days. The blood was removed surgically with a syringe. I found a needle mark on his right arm." Arjun clenched his jaws. "But you said to Mansi it was a vampire's job." "Yeah, I think so. I found this." The doctor pointed towards 2 small puncture wounds on Raj's neck. At first it looked like a snake bite or something like that, but the distance between them suggested a wider jaw. Arjun leaned in to take a closer look. He'd barely even looked at it when he pulled himself up, looked at the doctor and asked, "Tell me, doctor, how much do you know about vampires?" "Not much. Well, they hate sunlight and they drink human blood and, yeah, that's about it. Why do you ask?" "It wasn't a vampire." The doctor looked confused. "What? But then..." "Yeah, they don't bite. They rip their victim's throat apart. They have a different set of about 100 teeth, maybe more. This was not a vampire, and clearly whoever did this doesn't know about vampires either. Maybe they're trying to pass it off as a vampire." The doctor looked away in the air, thinking. "Then this must be it," he said to himself. "I'm sorry, what?" I also found traces of a chemical. I'm not sure what it is. I've sent it to the lab." Arjun nodded and then pointed at the body. "What do we know about him?" "Not much. Lived alone. No friends. Family is away too." "You said he was found in the river, so they tried to get rid of him. He wasn't meant to be found." The doctor thought this Arjun guy was pretty dumb, but he didn't say it. Instead, "Well, obviously. Why would they want him found?" "No, I mean, what if he isn't the only victim? Maybe he's just the one that we found." The doctor was now thinking that maybe he wasn't that stupid. He was the one feeling foolish, so he tried to distract himself from that thought. "Oh no, there had been others before." "What?" "Yes, these bloodless bodies have been washing up on the shore for quite a time. They could not be identified. Oh, wait." He went and came back with a few folders. He showed Arjun the pictures of the other bodies. They all had the same marks on their neck. I don't get it. Why are we only hearing about this now? Arjun asked. Because I wasn't working here. I was just transferred here a few weeks ago. When this one arrived, they said, "Oh, there's another one." I asked, and they told me they'd found bloodless bodies before, but they could never identify them. Arjun must have come to a conclusion because he sighed and said, "Okay, thanks for your help." And he extended his hand. The doctor quickly removed the right glove and shook Arjun's hand. "I'm sorry I couldn't help more. I didn't know about vampires. Mansi never tells me anything." "Oh yeah, she does that." Arjun snickered. "I mean, don't get me wrong, she is a gentle soul, but she loves to play Dumbledore, never tells anyone anything. I didn't know about you until she told me. Don't think about it too much. Now you do know about vampires." He smiled. They both left the morgue. The doctor went back to his desk and Arjun to the door where he'd stopped, and turned back and said, "Oh, one more thing. Vampires don't hate sunlight. I mean, it's not the light, it's the heat they despise." And then he left the mortuary. When he walked out, he took out his phone and dialed a number. It rang and Mansi answered. "Hey," she said. "Hey there, just came back from the morgue. I looked at the bodies." "And?" "They drained the blood, but with a syringe. Though I did find bite marks on the bodies, but..." "But what?" she asked. "But they are not the bite marks of a vampire." "So what do you think?" Who's working the missing persons case?" "Why'd you ask?" "There might be others whose bodies we never found. Might give us a clue, a link between the victims, a pattern." "Oh, call Dev. He'll help you." "Okay, I'll call you back if I find something." Arjun hanged up and dialed another number. He had urgency in his nerves. He wanted to do this before anyone else went missing, but he didn't know that he was already very late. Not very far from where Arjun stood in the street outside the mortuary, making a call to Inspector Dev, Nina and her family's next victim were playing with each other on the couch in their living room. Where's your mum and aunt?" he asked, looking around, hoping for something. "They're out." "We're all alone," Nina grinned. "Oh, great." He smiled too, because that's exactly what he'd been hoping for. He pushed Nina down on her back and started kissing her. Nina tried to push him away, but not too hard. "Whoa, what's your hurry, cowboy?" But he wasn't even listening. He'd already started pulling Nina's dress down, so she went along. She moved her lips down his neck and... He screamed. At first he didn't realize what was happening to him. He thought that Nina was just being too aggressive, but then he felt it. He felt the venom spreading through his veins and his muscles going stiff. He tried to move them, but couldn't. Nina pushed him on the floor, and he dropped like a mannequin. He heard a hissing, and then he saw two older women coming out of the kitchen, and the last thing he felt was the needle pushing through his arm. The last thing he saw was their smiling faces, their elliptical pupils, and their forked tongues. The next day Arjun went to Metro City College. He had already been to a few missing persons' houses in the list that Inspector Dev had given him. It was a scrimp warm noon of late November. He knocked on the door of a room of a college dormitory. Someone opened the door, and Arjun looked to see who it was. The boy must have been in his early 20s, but his beard was so thick he looked 40. His eyes were red as if he hadn't slept in forever. Arjun could smell alcohol on his breath, and the boy looked miserable. Arjun looked at him in pity. Ahmed?" Arjun asked. The boy didn't answer. He left the door open and walked in. Arjun didn't know what to do, so he followed and closed the door behind him. "Are you Ahmed Qureshi?" Arjun asked again. The boy snapped. "And who are you? Another reporter? Come here to help me? You're going to run too after listening to my story. Look, just leave faster than you arrived." Arjun calmly listened to him. When he was finished and was staring at him, grinding his teeth, he softly, slowly said, "I'm not a reporter. My name is Arjun Warrior." "Warrior?" Ahmed startled upon hearing his name. "Are you related to—" "Yes." Arjun spoke before Ahmed could even finish his question. "I'm his son. That's why I don't usually give out my last name." "Well, what are you doing here? What do you want?" "I'm searching for whoever took your friend." "Oh." Ahmed pretended to look amazed. "So you are a vampire hunter. Oh, look at you. Look at the great Arjun Warrior, son of the richest man in the country, bored of his life, his luxury, a freaking vampire hunter. Leaves at night to kill the Bloodsuckers. Well, boo-hoo. Sorry to burst your bubble, Bruce Wayne, but there are no vampires." Ahmed had lost it. He was enraged by the fact that Arjun had come here hoping he could actually play his game, that he had decided to ignore the fact that Ahmed had lost his best friend, his brother. He was also angry at himself to ever believe in such nonsense. He was angry because he saw himself in Arjun. "They're not real. They never have been. Only if I could have brought myself to believe this earlier, my friend might still be alive. Leave, Arjun Warrior. Leave the way you came. Leave before I call the police." Arjun silently watched Ahmed break down. He watched him crash to the floor. He watched him sob. He knew, however, that he could not feel his pain because he had never lost someone so close to him. Not like this, but he could understand his pain. He could understand that he had to be more than himself at this point. He had to be a brother. "Ahmed." Arjun grabbed his arm, pulled him up, and sat him down on the bed. Then he took a seat on a chair and held Ahmed's face straight with his hands. "Ahmed, look at me. Look at me." Ahmed looked into his small, fiery eyes. "You were right. Vampires didn't take your brother. Yes, I know he was like a brother to you. They weren't vampires, but it doesn't mean that they were not real. Yes." He went on reading his expressions. "They are real, and not just vampires. Everything you have or haven't heard about is real. Vampires, werewolves, ghosts, witches, monsters, everything. Everything is real. The world is covered in so much darkness, it's impossible to see them. There is so much evil in the world that no one can ever imagine. But it doesn't mean that you would throw away a beautiful thing, the only thing we have that they don't. Life. The beautiful gift of life. Faith, a noble cause. Love, compassion. A sense of being part of something bigger than us. A bond that ties us all. I know you've lost your best friend. I can never even begin to imagine what it feels like. Only you do, and if you don't want someone else to go through that, what you're going through right now, if you don't want someone else to lose their friend or family, please tell me everything you know and help me find who did this." Arjun let go of Ahmed's face, which was blank for another minute, but then an expression of disgust appeared on it. "You don't have to find out who did it. I know already. It was that bitch. You just have to find out where she is." "Who? Who was it?" "That bitch, Nina Kravosos." And then he went on to tell Arjun how he and his friend Vikram had met her in a club, how they became friends, how she took Vikram to have dinner with her mother and her aunt. He told him how she always purposely left Vikram's phone behind when she took him to her house, so its location history couldn't be traced to her house. He told him what happened the night he last saw his friend, and after that. He told him how no one had believed him, and how the only thing he ever found was a shoe that he'd given him as a present. When Arjun left, he didn't have any answers, but he had a name. Kravosos. The sun retired for the day, and the moon took its place in the black-purple sky. A few patches of clouds covered it as if it was a canvas, and they were trying to complete the painting, adding in more beautiful details. Though it was a pleasant evening, Nancy didn't look happy at all. She was tired and still working. She had a bunch of books opened on her desk, and she was scrutinizing them, looking for something. She only looked up because she heard someone on the front stairs. It was Arjun. He too was very tired, but not as much as Mansi, and he was about to see that. He climbed the stairs and entered through the huge door. He didn't have to struggle to find Mansi, which was usually the case because she was always somewhere in the basement, but not this time. The whole library was deserted, as usual. Only a few lights were on. It was awfully quiet. He looked to his right, and there she was. She had a small face, but a long, furrowed forehead. Long black hair, which was tied up in a ponytail with a hairband. Arjun knew that she did that when she was working. She'd also rolled up the sleeves of her top, and she was looking at him, but with big, tired eyes, and they had dark circles below them. Now, the thing with Arjun was that wherever he went, he always had his authoritarian look on his face, like he was in charge. That's just how he worked, but as soon as he laid eyes upon Mansi, that look vanished from his face because now Mansi had that look on hers. As soon as Mansi saw who it was on the stairs, she let out a soft, "Oh, it's you," and buried her head back into the books. Arjun slowly approached her desk. He opened his mouth to say something, but... "So, did you find anything?" Mansi asked. "Yeah," Arjun began, but he looked at the books on the desk. "Are you working a different case?" he asked, pointing at the pictures of the creatures on the books. Mansi looked up and sighed. She ran her hands down her face, and that's when Arjun saw her eyes, and he understood why she was avoiding eye contact. "Whoa, when was the last time you..." Arjun flicked his palm, bent his lips. "Slept." "Oh, God, I'm cold. The chemical found in the victim's body was a venom." "Oh, yeah, that makes sense since it's not a vampire, so I've been looking at every venomous, blood-sucking creature. No luck yet." "Whoa, you have to look. I thought you'd memorized every book in your library." Mansi narrowed her brows. "Funny. There are thousands of books, centuries of knowledge. Nobody could memorize it all. I only memorized the event log." "Yes, of course you did. Venom, huh? That doesn't really go with my theory." "You have a theory?" "Yeah, I mean, the way the blood was removed from the bodies. I thought maybe they're trying to preserve it for, you know." "You think it's a drug cartel from Crime City?" "Yeah, why not?" Arjun asked upon seeing the reaction on Mansi's face. "Well, could have been true, but there's one thing. We found the bodies intact. Even if they are selling human blood to vampires, why would they throw away a perfectly good body full of healthy organs? And I have a man there. Also, there's venom." "Yeah, I see that now." Arjun did not look disappointed. It wasn't the first time his theory turned out to be wrong. In fact, that happened more often, but he always had something else, something more, and so was the case this time too. I've got something else." "Yeah?" "Just a name. Kravosos." Mansi's face fell so quickly that Arjun didn't have time to wait for an answer. "What?" he asked. "No, it can't be. It's not possible." "What? Why is it not possible?" Mansi was thinking rapidly. Her pupils were moving left and right so fast Arjun thought she was having a seizure. Then she hurried back towards the door that led to the basement. Arjun followed. He was one of the few who were allowed to go down there. The basement was huge, and the insufficient lighting made it look even larger because some dark corners didn't seem to have an end wall. He climbed down the stairs right behind Mansi, who, as she was looking for the right shelf, spoke. "Kravosos literally means bloodsucker in Russian." She pulled out a book once she figured out which shelf it was on, and then she turned pages with an electric speed that Arjun started to worry that she might even rip a page or two. When she found the page, she put the book on one of the many wooden tables which practically filled the remaining space that was left by the ceiling-touching bookshelves, and turned on the lamp that sat on there, covered in dust. She pointed to an event log. "On January 16th, 1998, my father exterminated a family of dark wizards in Siberia. They were practicing dark magic with human blood and snake venom. My father wrote they were trying to remain young forever, They killed humans and drained their blood, which they would later drink after a ritual. The locals there called them Krovosos, which translates to bloodsucker. That's why I didn't think of it. It has no mention of themselves being venomous, and I thought they were all dead. Arjun read the log, and then he looked at Mansi, who was already waiting for him to finish reading. "You think they succeeded?" he asked. "Even if they did, it doesn't make any sense. My father killed them all. It says here, the head of the family, their 2 sons, and his brother." Arjun remembered the name. Nina Kravosos. Only males. What about the females? It doesn't say. Arjun closed his eyes, sighed, and walked in a circle. He then looked at Mansi and said, "It's the remaining females of the family. They're practically mocking us by calling themselves Kravosos." Then he told her everything he'd learned from Ahmed. Everything about Nina Kravosos, her mother and her aunt. When he finished, they stood in silence for a full minute. "Okay, good job, Arjun. Really well done, like always. I'll take it from here." "What? What do you mean you'll take it? It's my case." "No, your job was just to find out who did this. I'll handle it now. I have trained exterminators." "Well, they were not born trained. I could train too if you just wouldn't take everything away." Mansi stared at him for a second. "Do you remember what happened last time?" "Well," Arjun looked embarrassed, "I took care of it." "You burned its whole body. I needed its skin." "Okay, but you don't need anything this time." They were throwing remark after remark on each other, one after another, without stopping. "I do. I need their venom to make an antidote for the other creature's venom." "So I'll bring some venom for you." "Don't be stupid, Arjun. They have super heightened senses." Arjun had already opened his mouth to say something, but he stopped, and then, after several seconds, he said, "Do they now?" "Yes. They'd hear your heartbeat from a kilometer away, and they'd smell you from even farther." Arjun contemplated this situation and, "In that case, you take care of it." "Thank you," said Mansi with relief. They both climbed the stairs back to the level. Arjun asked Mansi to get some rest, which she agreed to. He wished her good night and was about to leave when Mansi said to his back, "Don't worry, Arjun. We'll get them. We will." She said the last bit with a smile. She never did that to Arjun, but she considered him a friend, unlike others who were just colleagues to her. "Look, I know, Arjun stopped to say one last thing. "I just hope you get them before they get anyone else." And then he walked out. Mansi sent some of her best exterminators to the block where they'd pinpointed the location of the Kravosos family, based on the clubs where the victims were last seen and the riverbank where they were found. They scoured the block for about a week. They easily blended in with the people. They carried their equipment and weapons in normal-looking backpacks. Sometimes they would pretend to look for an address, asking people and local vendors, but they weren't even close enough. Well, about a week later, Nina brought in another one. It was a rather noisy evening, maybe because it was Friday, and everyone was rushing to get home faster. She unlocked the door of her apartment a few blocks away from where the exterminators were patrolling, turned the lights on, and welcomed in a young and tall but very shy boy. "Come on, Nick. You can leave your backpack by the door, or if you'd like, you can put it by the couch." Nick hesitated to come in, standing by the door. "Oh, come on, I didn't know you were this shy," Nina chuckled. "You're very sweet. Oh, come on." Nick finally entered. He just stepped into the living room when... "Oh, my God," he said, gaping at the stereo in the corner. "You have the Behringer MS-20. Whoa, this one's so much bigger than mine." He went on to unpack his backpack and reveal a smaller stereo set. "Oh, can I play something on it? Please?" Nina smiled. "Oh, be my guest. Can I get you something to drink?" When she turned, she said, "Nerd," under her breath. A few minutes later, a piece of nice romantic music was playing on the stereo when Nina pushed Nick onto the couch, the death seat. She was being impatient. She pulled him in closer to her and leaned in to kiss, but Nick pulled his head back. Oh, come on. No need to be shy. No, it's not that. It's just... Before we do this, shouldn't we, What? Come on, say it. Don't be shy, Nina said, smiling at him. Okay. Nick dropped the act. Shouldn't we call your mum and your aunt? Nina's smile vanished. She quickly threw herself away from the couch to a safe distance. Nick too stood up and smiled cheerfully. I mean, isn't it rude just to leave them behind? Nina made a hissing noise, and her face transformed. She now had elliptical pupils and a forked tongue. Her mother and her aunt came out too. One of them said, Quick, close the door. Oh, don't worry about it. Nick showed them a small shiny key and then put it back into his jeans, still smiling as wide as he could. Who are you? One of the older women asked. Name's Arjun, he finally revealed. He couldn't control his smile because everything had worked out exactly as he had planned. Do you remember the keeper that killed your family? I'm friends with his daughter. Oh, and she didn't say hello. So you are one of them. So today, after all these years, I'll finally avenge my husband and my sons. I don't think so. Kill him. Nina stepped forward cautiously. Arjun took a step back and... Oh, come on, Nina. I thought we were having a moment. I even brought a present for you, he said, and reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a smoke bomb, but it wasn't one. He threw it on the floor, and a blinding flash of bright white light shot out of it, and Arjun turned his back just in time and closed his eyes. Well, the Kravosos family wasn't prepared for this. They all screamed as the light was much too much for their eyes. They put their hands in front of their faces, rubbed their eyes, but nothing helped them to see again. You think you've got us? Well, I could still smell you from kilometers away. Of course, replied Arjun, who was now looking for something in his backpack. But you don't think I only brought a present for Nina, do you? I mean, that would be rude. He pulled out an automatic fragrance dispenser and turned it on. It started spraying rose fragrance everywhere, and within seconds the whole apartment started to smell of roses. Well, the three women were trying to find their way around in the living room. Nina's mother tripped once. The other woman, however, was trying to listen to Arjun breathe, or the beating of his heart. Arjun knew he didn't have long before they'd start to see again. Oh, don't struggle, Nina's aunt. I did bring something for you too, but Nina already had so much bigger and better, he said as he turned the volume of the stereo to the top. The Kravosos family now didn't have a chance. They put their hands to their ears. The attacks on their senses were unbearable. They all started crying and begging Arjun to stop. Arjun, on the other hand, put on headphones and was now dancing in the living room with an imaginary partner. Soon the smile on his face disappeared, though, and he channeled rage in his eyes. He reached in his backpack once more and pulled out a machete. He pulled it out of its sheath with a clenched jaw, not because it was difficult to pull it out. No, he clenched his jaw because he knew what he had to do next. The music stopped. The effect of the flash also started to wear off. The only thing left, though, was the rose fragrance, and just as the Kravosos family opened their eyes, they saw the Grim Reaper in the form of a tall young man holding a machete in his hand and rage in his eyes. They all heard the machete slashing through the air. Only Nina heard it 3 times. It was not as serene a night, not calm or peaceful or lonely, but it was still a beautiful night. It was still a fresh, healthy and clear night. It was now really a night to take a walk on a long, lonely road, dimly lit by dingy streetlights, and the sky filled with hundreds or thousands of stars twinkling, as if they were giggling, maybe this time with a few patches of clouds. It was a lovely night. Mansi was waiting, still awake, in her pajamas, in the library when Arjun walked in, happy, cheerful, smiling and maybe taunting Mansi, but before she could say anything, before she could burst and take it all out on him, he showed her a duffel bag, which probably contained the severed heads of the Crovisos family. "Got your venom," he declared. "How in the bloody hell did you find them?" You're welcome." "How? My exterminators were looking for them for an entire week." Pattern, Mansi, pattern. I mean, nothing against..." He raised his hands to do air quotes. "Your exterminators, but they are not detectives. I looked for a pattern and I found one. They were targeting loners, orphans, people who lived alone, people who no one would look for." Mansi completed Arjun's sentence. "Exactly. I just went outside each of those bars and clubs and asked for donations for an orphanage. She fell right for it. No one, Mansi, no one donated as much as a rupee. And she donated 500. Mansi was nodding without even realizing it. "Well done. You did great. You proved yourself. I'm sorry that I doubted you." "Well, you had your reasons. I couldn't bring that damn skin to make into your handbag." Mansi looked guilty. How did you... "Oh, come on. Don't pretend like I haven't seen your collection. To be honest, I burned it partially on purpose. It was horrific skin. It would have looked awful as a handbag." They both let out a small burst of laughter. Then Mansi's phone started to ring. "Oh, I'll see you later. Good night," said Arjun. "Yes." Mansi replied and went on to answer her phone. Arjun walked out into the intoxicating night. He took a moment to look at the crescent moon, appreciating its aura. Some things are still beautiful despite being incomplete, he thought. "Arjun." Arjun turned back. It was Mansi. She was climbing down the front stairs. "New case?" he asked. "Yeah." "What is it this time?" "By the looks of it," Mansi paused and said, "shapeshifters."
Fleshgate by Imperial Invective. Months later, I can remember all of them, down to the slightest idiosyncrasies and quirks. They were my friends, and they're gone now. There's a hole in my life where they were. Sometimes I remember something they said or did, and it'll hit me like a ton of bricks. They're gone now. I'm only left with memories of them. I'm sorry for being maudlin and bringing everyone down, but I think this is the only way I can really introduce my story and explain why I feel like I have to type this out. I think that writing this is the only way I can learn to accept that. I try to keep these downer tendencies to myself as I'm writing all this down, but I can't make any promises. I know that being the third wheel in a group can be a terrible thing, but I can't think of something worse, being the fifth wheel. If you're the third wheel, that makes your group a semi-functional tricycle. If you're the fifth wheel, you're left as some obscure car from the 50s that no one remembers or cares about. Imagine not being able to follow the in-jokes and shared history of one couple, and multiply that by 2. Yeah, getting stuck as the fifth wheel is twice as bad. That was the frame of mind I had as we piled into Ian's car to go to Gila National Forest for our hike. I know that's a weird opening to give to all of this after my depressing opening, but I want you all to have an idea of my mindset. Not quite sure how I know to describe all of this. I do know that I need to tell someone. I need someone else to know what happened and help me come to terms with it all. I think the only way I'll be able to explain this would be to help you see from my perspective as much as possible. So there we were, driving down to Gila for a holiday. with me feeling like the fifth wheel wedged between two of Ian's friends who I didn't know. The three of us were cramped in the back seat while Ian and his girlfriend were up front. I look back at that unnecessary bit of moping back in August 2016 as one of the last few moments of normalcy I would ever have in my life. Try to make the best of the situation, I really did. Ian was always the more social of us. Our mum used to tell us that Ian could make anyone his friend, and once I had a friend that I kept them. It was one of those parental platitudes that was given to reassure a socially awkward child that there was nothing wrong. Unfortunately, it would take me almost 19 years to learn that that wasn't true. Instead of taking my therapist's diagnosis of social anxiety disorder following a breakdown after an office get-together as a means for seeking treatment, I used it as an excuse to cloister myself off from the world. I stayed in my apartment when I wasn't working and told myself I was just doing what was best for me. Of course, Ian decided that that wasn't healthy and convinced me to go on a weekend-long hike with him. It wasn't until I showed up at his house at 6 in the morning on Friday, after taking the day off of work, that I saw he'd invited others along. I think he saw it as a means of getting me help and breaking me out of my shell. Unfortunately, though, with Ian's extroverted nature, he didn't realize that I liked being in my shell. It was comfortable. Well, a turtle doesn't like being broken out of its shell. After a brief introduction, where I caught no one's name except for those I already knew, my brothers and his girlfriend Jessica, due to morning grogginess and the rushed introduction, we all packed up the car and left for our hike. It took 3 hours of mostly awkward silence for us to reach our destination. Ian tried to make conversation, but my short responses and the others' sleepiness killed him off fairly quickly. We found the parking lot near the Gila Cliff dwellings. As we unpacked our gear, we took a moment to bask in the beautiful sight that sat perched above us. It's hard to believe that someone could carve an entire town into the face of a cliff. But 700 years ago, people managed to do just that. Given that the parking lot was empty except for us, we'd find out why later, and I was in need of some social lubrication, we split a 6-pack of beer and took in the majesty. As we finished our beers, got everything prepared and used the restrooms, Ian explained what path we'd be taking in detail. What we didn't know and what my brother had failed to tell us was that the West Fork Trail had been closed all that summer due to flooding. To be honest, the path wasn't that dangerous. They just opted not to clear it due to the recent flooding, so it would be a bit more of a rugged hike. While it wasn't perilous in itself, it did keep us from encountering other hikers, which would cause a lot of problems when we actually needed help. Ian figured that we could make about 2 to 3 miles an hour. We'd be able to complete the Gila Loop, which was about 30 miles long, with enough time to get back on Sunday and be ready for our respective jobs on Monday, with no one any the wiser that we'd backpacked a closed section of the national park. As his explanation was a bit heavy on names and locations, some of which I can't recall clearly, I'll opt to include a picture rather than spend a page writing about everything. And for the sake of simplicity, this is the path we were planning to take. It's a simple loop. In addition, I'll include a more detailed map of the entire area so you can orient yourselves if you want to trace the trail we took. If you plan on following along with the path as I tell you about this experience, all I can say is good luck. Even as I stare at it now, I feel just as lost now as I was then. I was just going along with the group and trying to keep a positive mind about everything. I wanted to try and do a better job of getting to know Ian and Jessica's friends. I think my circumstances had finally begun to set in. I had been living in a quiet apartment in New Mexico for over a year, and I had no friends. I'd go to work and then home without doing anything else. Sometimes I'd spend the entire weekend without saying a single word to anyone or seeing another person. I knew that if I didn't change something quick, that solitude would become the norm, and that frightened me. Our first day was relatively quiet. We spent a majority of the time taking in the sights, soaking in the sun and breathing the fresh air. The hike felt like we were constantly moving upward. As I was unaccustomed to hiking, I frequently fell behind, but I never completely lost sight of my brother's friends. While we took a break under the shade of a tree whose bark looked like dried scales from some long dead alligator, I tried to make small talk with everyone. I fell into a quick conversation with Ian and Jessica about their work and what they'd been up to lately. When it came time to talk to the other two, I only managed to get the conversation going for a few sentences before it shriveled up and died. I remembered assuring myself that it'd be easier when we stopped for the night. We rested for a while before continuing our ascent up the mesa. This was where everyone realized how truly out of my element I was here. The path up the mesa was agonizing for me. It seemed to never stop climbing up, and there was almost no shade to keep the sun from beating down on us. I was sweating buckets, panting and wheezing whenever they stopped to wait for me to catch up. I tried to pretend that I didn't notice their exasperated whispers or side glances, but that was easier said than done. They seemed like the outdoorsy type that had been doing this sort of thing for years. By the time our path started to level out, I was ready to turn around and leave. It wasn't until we reached the top and looked out over everything that I realized how foolish of an idea that was. Even if I was able to convince Ian to give me the keys and let me walk back to the car and go home, I had no idea where I was going or what trail markers we'd been using. I imagined splitting off from the group and tromping through poison ivy, bumbling into a rapey gang of banjo-playing hillfolk, or getting lost in the dark and wandering in circles until exhaustion and exposure took me. Even if I did manage to hike back to the parking lots, where was I going to go? Would I go back home to my empty apartment, eat a Hot Pocket, and feel sorry for myself again? Well, I decided to tough it out and continue hiking. We made camp at a dry section of the Indian Creek after having hiked a decent amount. Ian was confident that we'd make it back on Sunday and that the few days we had were going to be less intensive. We ate some food and stowed the rest in a bear bag a ways from the camp. We were passing a bottle of whiskey around in front of a campfire we'd built, and the conversation shifted to the most awkward moments anyone had ever experienced. Well, Ian retold his story about the first time he met Jessica at a club, where he was way too drunk for his own good and ended up puking into her purse. Jessica bristled at the memory and jokingly called Ian an asshole for that. When each person shared their stories about a bumbling first kiss, where their braces got hooked together, locking themselves out of their dorm rooms in their underwear, their cringe-inducing high school edgelord personality, and caring for their drunken boyfriend who puked into their favorite bag. And then the bottle came to me. It was my turn to tell them a story. I instantly knew what my most embarrassing story was, the moment we started the conversation. I didn't tell them about the door, though. Instead, I made up a story about ripping my pants in front of a group of people during a work interview that I'd probably ripped straight from a 90s sitcom. They laughed with me. I felt like a piece of shit. They'd bothered to reveal their most embarrassing moments and were commiserating in their shared experience, and here I was too afraid to tell them the truth, to tell them about the door. Well, the conversation continued for a bit afterwards as we killed the bottle. When it was dead, we went to bed still pretty drunk after dousing the campfire. I woke up in the middle of the night desperately needing to use the bathroom. Still a bit fuzzy from the whiskey, I tromped out into the woods to do my business. It wasn't until I was almost done that Nadia's voice cut through the blackness. She asked me if I had a lighter. Since I hadn't heard her approach, the sound of her voice made me jump. It would have scared the piss out of me had I not just gone to the bathroom. I mumbled something about having a lighter back around the camp. She told me that she'd dropped hers and asked me to help her look for it. But I was way too out of it to be any good to anyone, so I told her that we'd look for it later. I vaguely remember her mumbling a protest as I stumbled back to my sleeping roll. It wasn't until I woke up the next morning that I realized how stupid I'd been. Apparently, they'd heard yowling in the surrounding woods all last night. They thought that the sound could have possibly belonged to the Mexican grey wolf, but no one was sure. Ian knew that they inhabited the area, but were very uncommon. I paled at the thought of being mauled by a wolf while out peeing in the middle of the woods. I decided next time I'd wake up Ian before going out into the woods to answer the call of nature. We packed up a while later after a light breakfast and continued on our hike. The second day was a little better. The overbearing sun I suffered under previously was hidden behind heavy clouds. We crossed a number of rivers as we followed the 157-729 junction. We went along a little bare canyon as we headed towards the TJ Corral, which was towards the end of the hiking loop. As the path hadn't been cleared yet, we frequently had to dodge patches of poison ivy and stinging nettles. I fared much better on this hike, and despite nursing a slight hangover, I felt like I was doing a much better job of getting around with my pack and clunky boots that my brother had loaned me. We made camp around midday and purified some water from a nearby river, as the last section of our hike didn't really have many opportunities for drinkable water. I think that maybe our encounter last night with the yipping and yowling wolves had added a bit of seriousness to the hike, as there wasn't as much joking around or conversations this night. We talked a little bit, but mainly just had something small to eat while we stared into the campfire. Ian and Jessica were the first to call it a night. I stayed up with the others for a bit, but we were mostly silent. The other two slowly went off after a bit, and I decided to enjoy the warmth a bit longer before getting ready to go to bed for the night. Just as I'd finished dousing the fire, I remember Jerry coming up to me and asking me for the map. He told me he wanted to plan out the rest of our trip, that there was a spring nearby that we should really visit that wasn't too far out of the way. I grabbed the map from Ian's pack and gave it to him before turning in. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Ian rustling around his bag. He sounded angrier the longer he searched. He knocked mess kits into each other as he peered deep into the pack for something that was missing. Frustrated that he wasn't finding the item he was looking for, he turned the bag upside down and dumped out everything. He was practically ready to tear out his own hair, and it seemed like he'd spent the entire morning looking for that one thing. Wanting to know what was up, I walked up to him and we started talking. He asked me, "Hey man, you seen the map anywhere? I can't seem to find it." "Where's Jerry?" I gave him the map last night so we could map out a little detour on the trip so we could visit a spring. "Why don't you ask him? He probably knows," I answered. It was then that Ian said something that changed everything. "Jerry? Who are you talking about? You mean Oliver? Don't tell me you thought his name was..." Well, I explained. "No, I'm talking about Jerry. Tall guy, kind of lanky." "But you're joking, right?" He looked confused for a few seconds and made a questioning sound like a really old computer trying to process something moments before it catches on fire. The pieces clicked, and Ian shouted, "Who the fuck is Jerry?" getting the attention of everyone in the area. "Wait, he was... Some fucking guy asked you for our map in the middle of the night, and you just fucking gave it to him? You handed our stuff to some random stranger you met in the woods?" I tried to explain myself and tell him that I knew Jerry, and that he did too, since I remember hiking with him the day before, but I couldn't find the words to convey that point. It was here that Jessica stepped in and asked what was going on. Well, Ian vented vitriol. "How fucking stupid are you, Evan? Some random guy named Jerry comes up to you in the middle of the night asking for our shit and you just give it to him? Jesus Christ, we needed that map to get around smoothly since the trails out here haven't even been cleared." Ian shouted for about 15 minutes while everyone became aware of our situation. Jessica managed to calm him down enough so we could figure out our next move. While we weren't completely screwed, as Ian had memorized a large portion of the trail markers, it was going to be a lot harder to navigate the necessary junctions to bring us back around to the car. We packed up all our stuff, making sure that the guy hadn't taken anything else, and then we left. The entire hike, I could feel Ian's eyes drilling into me. The last time I'd seen him this furious was just before he got into a fight with Aaron Fredlinger and beat him to a pulp. He got suspended for a week, and Aaron got a black eye, a busted lip, and never said anything about our mother again. Each time we came across a break in the path, we spent a few minutes while Ian tried to remember where to go. The fact that the trails had been closed and the paths were overgrown only served to make everything more difficult. I think that's how we made a wrong turn, began wandering on the faint trail. I don't actually know if that's where it went wrong since we didn't have the map at that time. That's my best guess. We were further away from home and safety. Part 2. Towards midday, tensions had reached a critical point. Ian frequently mumbled things that would make a sailor blush, while Jessica tried to hide the fact that she was close to crying. Oliver attempted to lighten the situation by telling everyone that we just had to follow the compass and we get home safe and sound. Oliver's girlfriend didn't say much. She just stared quietly at her feet as she walked. I think she had the right idea, since Lucas was constantly misplacing his footing and slipping. He looked like he'd downed a fifth of vodka and was now trying to walk home on a tightrope while being randomly shocked with a cattle prod. The realization twisted something deep down inside me and made me want to throw up. I stopped walking and began talking to Lucas. "Yeah, what's going on with you, man?" Ian, still pissed off at me, took this opportunity to vent a bit. "Huh? What are you talking about now?" Lucas is bumbling and twitching all over the place. What's wrong with him? "Don't be a dick, man. You know he has multiple sclerosis. We told you before the hike started about his condition." As soon as he said it, the events came rushing back to me as clear as day. I recalled Ian pulling me to the side and telling me about his friend's diagnosis and how this was likely going to be his last opportunity to undertake a long hike, so we had to help him and move slowly. I remembered watching him scramble up the trail and thinking about our own mom and her illness. It brought back bittersweet memories of birthday wishes given to us from hospital beds, and hearing her sob quietly to herself in the middle of the night when she thought we were asleep. Guilt flooded over me, and I stepped forward to apologize to Lucas. When it happened, Lucas growled at me the instant I took a step forward, and he dropped to a hunched position on his hands and feet. It almost looked like his skin was bristling at a possible threat, and I could see his broken and decaying teeth as he hissed at all of us before taking off at a hopping stride into the woods. He moved like one of those CGI monstrosities from the last Planet of the Apes movie. His shaky and unstable balance was replaced by a more natural and animalistic gait as he loped into the distance and disappeared amongst the trees. The last thing I saw was what I assumed were his clothes, sloughing off of its body, revealing that they weren't actually clothes, but grey folds of skin. Oliver was the first to talk. What the fuck? As soon as Oliver said those words, it was like a switch had flipped that set everyone to panic mode. We began to run along the trail as if it would do us any good. The only thought in my head was to put as much distance as possible between me and that thing. I think it took a good 15 minutes for us to run out of energy with our heavy packs and the disorienting nature of the woods. As we tried to catch our breath, I surveyed the area around us and came to a terrible realization. In our panic, we'd run off of the path and were now even deeper in the woods. We tried to make sense of what we'd seen. I just remember Ian mumbling the same phrase over and over. What the hell was that? And the short answer is, it was Lucas. The long of it is this. There was no Lucas, not really. Sorry for interrupting the story in the middle like this, but I think now is the best time to try and explain everything. I know how confusing this all seems with Jerry and Lucas. But the truth is, I did that because I don't think I could have appropriately explained it to you without you first experiencing it from my eyes. I don't know what to call those things, but they do something to your mind. They insulate themselves into your memories. They wrap themselves up in a wall of your recollections, and even though you know something is wrong, you can't quite put your finger on it. Your group of 4 friends could grow to 5, and you wouldn't be any the wiser. A part of you will stupidly admonish you for ever wondering how many there were. You look at it, and you recognize the face. You remember events. You remember getting drunk at a bar together. You remember them crying on your shoulder after a tough breakup. You remember everything that happened between you, but none of it's true. I don't know how it does it. It crawls into your head somehow and makes you see things in a way that benefits them. It can mold memories, but it can't mimic human movement. It walks on all 4s, not 2 feet. It growls, hisses, and snarls. It doesn't talk. It infiltrates, observes, and waits. It was hunting us and trying to drive us deeper into the woods. And it was succeeding. Never really reached much of a conclusion about what that thing was, but we did reach a consensus that we had to get out of here as soon as possible. I watched Ian as he looked around at the forest and came to the same realization that I had. We were lost. He didn't tell the others. I think he realized that panicking would only get us in more trouble. Instead, he told us to follow him. With the shock of our encounter setting in, we could do nothing but follow his lead and hope it all worked out. As we walked, we could hear the sounds of distant animals yowling and calling out to each other. The terror of our situation deepened as the others whispered that those were the same noises they'd heard the first night out in the woods. Whatever this thing was, it was following us and calling out to other things in the area. At the time, I couldn't stop thinking about one of them barreling out of the underbrush, sinking its black and rotting teeth into my neck before the rest of the group could react. I remember brushing the thought off and mentally reassuring myself that there were 6 of us here, and we'd only encountered one of these creatures. As the day pressed on, we seemingly wandered south in an attempt to pick up another trail that would lead us back to the parking lot. I couldn't help but shake a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. It felt like I'd forgotten some important deadline that I should never have forgotten about. It wasn't until Oliver mentioned his wish of being back in the car that Jessica stopped dead in her tracks. We all turned towards her, but knew what was coming the second she asked. We only took one car down, right? Well, Ian snapped, more fearful than frustrated. Of course we did. Remember how cramped everyone was in that tiny-ass Prius with all our camping gear smashed in the trunk and on our laps? Oh, what about it? Jessica went white, as if this was the first time that Ian had ever raised his voice to her. She paused for a moment before asking, "How many of us here right now, and how many does your car seat?" Ian's car sat 4 people comfortably, 5 uncomfortably, and there were 6 of us out in the woods at that moment. Everything happened at once. Ian swore. Oliver's girlfriend gave a half shriek and a half gasp, while I looked wide-eyed from person to person, trying to figure out which one of us didn't belong here. Sarah was the only one who managed to say something, and that was, "It's me, Sarah." She hadn't finished her words before her jaw popped open. I don't mean that it dropped open like she was astonished at something. It popped open like it had dislocated from her face. Space between her lips was a massive, sickly pink void of inflamed gums that was just at least a foot wide. She looked at us with dead and dull eyes as she slowly raised a twitching hand up to her jaw and tried to lock it back into a more human-esque appearance. She popped it back into place with a hollow-sounding squelch of meat and bone shifting as if nothing was wrong about what had just happened, before she tried to speak again. "It's me." Ian was the first to react. He stepped towards the failed facsimile of human and swung his walking stick at her face while bellowing, "Get out of here." She hopped back from the attack in a sloppy motion and landed on all 4s. Her body shuddered as if an electrical jolt had passed through her as she slowly backed away from all of us while facing Jessica the entire time. She hissed at us one last time before retreating deeper into the woods with a convulsing lope. It took a moment for all of us to regain our composure before we continued walking while trying to look in every direction at once. I remember Oliver rambling as we walked. He kept asking, although no one was responding to him. "Did you see how it moved? It was twitching like an epileptic in a rave. You ever see one of those documentaries about mad cow disease? Oh, that thing was twitching and moving like one of those infected cows. What the hell was that thing? Was it a person? What kind of person can do that to their body? It tried to talk to us. He rambled for hours before we had to stop. We had to tell him to shut up because we were worried about that thing hearing us, though that really wasn't the case. We made him stop talking because it only served to scare us. Despite stopping for the night, none of us actually slept. We sat around a campfire and listened to the sound of a high-pitched whining and yelping coming from all around us. It seemed like any time I actually got close to falling asleep, the calls would start up and jolt me awake. We spoke in hushed whispers and tried to figure out what they wanted with us, even though none of us really wanted the answer to that question. The hours dragged on almost endlessly, before dawn broke and we continued our hike. We spent Sunday hiking around, trying to find a familiar sight. Without any real sense of where we were and where we were going, our only hope was to stumble across another hiker, or find an area with a high enough vantage point that we could survey the entire area. Unfortunately, any elevations we climbed didn't afford a good view of the area, and it was extremely unlikely that we'd find another hiker due to the fact the trail had been closed and wasn't cleared. Even if we did, what were the chances that we'd trust them and could be certain that it wasn't one of those things? Midway through the day, Ian whispered to me, "Count people wearing backpacks. One of them's with us again." I casually looked over my shoulder and noticed that one of our group was walking without any gear. They trailed behind us, but were still in our vicinity. They moved slowly, but didn't show any of the jerky movements of the previous two. The thought that it was learning to mimic our movements unsettled me. Without really thinking, I shucked off my backpack and approached the imposter. Before they knew what was happening, I shoved them as hard as I could. Oh, the instant my hands pressed into their shirt, I felt something slick and warm give way, like the outer layer falling off of a rotten mango. Their shirt slid off their body into my hands, and I quickly realized it was their skin. The thing was actually naked, but gave the appearance of clothes by altering the color of its almost translucent skin. I dropped the skin that had sloughed off, and it hit the ground with a wet slap. The creature toppled backwards and began yelping. I can only describe the sound like this. Imagine getting out of your bed in the middle of the night to take a piss. As you're feeling your way through the darkness to get out of the room, you step on your dog's tail. Imagine that startled yelp of pain and the shock that comes along with it. Now focus on that emotion you felt when you heard that noise, that sudden surprise and guilt. In reality, the sound it made was nothing like a hurt dog. It just reminded me so much of a wounded pet that I can't differentiate the sounds. And here's the worst part. I shouldn't have felt bad. Those things were stalking and tormenting us. They were likely hunting us, and I felt bad for harming it. I shouldn't have felt bad about it, but it wanted me to, and so I did. The thing writhed on the ground on its back for a few seconds, making a pitiable noise. It reached back with its arms and pushed itself upright on its hands and on the balls of its feet. Its joints popped wetly, and its muscles and bones adjusted to fit this new position. The crab crawled away while shrieking the entire time as Ian pursued it with his walking stick, hoping to catch up to it and cave its head in. It wasn't until the thing disappeared from sight that I realized that the shrieking wasn't just coming from the monster, but from Jessica as well. It was trying to mimic her response. With Ian gone and Jessica's screams possibly drawing more of those things to us, I decided that I had to do something. I stepped forward and wrapped her up in my arms. She was shaking like a leaf in the wind. I stroked her hair and whispered that it was all over. She managed to choke out something about its face. All I could make out, though, was that there was something terribly wrong with its face. She then calmed down as I told her that everything was going to be all right. I didn't believe that myself, but it was the only thing I could think of that might bring her comfort. Ian returned, fuming that the monster had escaped. I awkwardly broke off the hug. Ian didn't say anything. He just started walking. We continued following him, hoping that he'd find the way, but knowing that he probably wouldn't. 6 hours later, we settled down for the night. It felt like we'd been going in circles all day and had made absolutely no progress. For all we knew, the thing could have been tinkering around with our memories and convincing us that familiar landmarks were new and leading us deeper into the woods. I didn't tell the others, but I think I knew what those things wanted with us. They wanted to lead us deeper into the woods. They were going to try and force us to exhaustion. When we were too weak to defend ourselves, they it would descend upon us and eat us. Oliver was right about that. That thing is similar to us in any way, and those twitching spasms were likely some sort of prion disorder that came from eating humans. After eating some jerky, since we decided against having a fire and drawing more of them to us, we reached the conclusion that we'd have to sleep in shifts. I volunteered for the first watch because my insight into the monster's behavior had robbed me of any desire to sleep. The others went off without so much as another word. They were exhausted. It wasn't until an hour into my watch that I realized that I was too. Even given the monster's grotesque appearance, everyone needs to sleep. Jessica joined me about 2 hours into my watch. She admitted that she couldn't sleep after our encounter with the creature. I nodded in agreement. Both of us had seen something terrible that the others hadn't. We talked for a good 30 minutes about it, and what we thought was going on and how everyone else was handling it. She was worried about Ian. She confessed that he was acting erratic and that he was scaring her. I wrapped my arm around her for a moment and told her that we were all scared. She looked in my eyes and told me that she was glad I was here. I felt something twist deep down inside me that I'd buried a long time ago when I'd first met her. The longer she stayed with me on watch, the more personal our conversation became. She confessed that she and Ian had been fighting a lot recently, and that she was wondering if they were going to work it all out. At the start of their relationship, they were great together. He made her feel wonderful. There was something that didn't feel right. Like there was something missing. I listened to her talk about everything that was going on in her life. I knew I had to do something. I knew that if I didn't do it now, I'd regret it. I had to tell her about the door. She listened quietly as I told her everything. It was the event that had precipitated my breakdown at work and my social anxiety disorder diagnosis at the therapist's office. Everything started off simply enough one Friday at work. I was in the lunchroom eating my sandwich and reading a book, as per my usual, while my co-workers talked about their plans for the weekend. One of them was having a housewarming party, and they were inviting everyone at work. I figured that the invitation was only extended to the people he was talking to, until he asked me if I'd be able to make it on Saturday. As it was the first time I'd been invited to hang out after work, I chose to go. I spent all of Saturday getting ready, planning what were interesting topics to bring up in case there was a lull in conversation, and the bottle of wine I was planning to give him as a housewarming gift. After psyching myself up, I left to go to the party with the bottle in hand and my spirits high. I convinced myself that I was going to be the life of the party, and that maybe if I played my cards right, I could finally find a friend at work that would make the time fly by instead of dragging on. It wasn't until I reached the house that the false bravado began to crumble apart. I stopped in front of the neighbor's house, as everywhere else had already got a car parked there. Then I felt my heart beating like I'd just run a mile. I began heading up the driveway with the wine bottle slick in my hands from my palms sweating. It wasn't until I reached the front door that I realized that something was terribly wrong. All that excitement that had been building up since Friday afternoon was now replaced with something else. Apprehension. All those topics I'd thought up seemed boring, and all the reassurances I'd given myself seemed hollow. I didn't feel prepared for this at all. At this point, a small part of me whispered something that has stuck with me to this very day. That voice intimated that they were never really wanting me to come out. They'd only given that invitation as a courtesy and didn't actually expect me to come to their house. It said that if I knocked on that door, that I'd be making a fool out of myself. It told me that I wasn't even comfortable in my own skin, so how could I even dare to imagine that they'd enjoy my company? They wanted to celebrate with their friends. They didn't want to listen to me fumble for something to talk about. All those fears flashed in front of me, taunting me, demanding that I knock on the door and make myself look like an idiot. That part of me told me that I was better off alone, and I listened. I turned around without even knocking on the door and I left. No one had come in and the music was playing loudly, so I doubt they would have even heard me anyways. I shouldn't have been there in the first place. Maybe I saw them watching me from the window. Maybe I didn't. Maybe they were laughing at me as I drove away, flustered and embarrassed. Maybe they went back to the party and joked about the social retard who'd seemingly freaked out and run away from their house, while I went home and cried in the shower. Maybe. Jessica listened as I told her the story. She smiled sadly as I started to cry onto her shoulder. All those feelings I'd experienced outside of my co-worker's house came rushing back. All that fear and foolishness, of fatalistic failure smashed into me like waves on the shore. She whispered soothing words into my ear and waited for me to collect myself. Once I did, she pulled away and told me it wasn't my fault. She was there under the moonlight with her face inches away from mine, but I did the worst thing I'd ever done in my life. I kissed her. It was slow, hesitant, romantic. I looked into her eyes and I saw her beautiful face. She pulled me towards her as she leaned back. Lost in the moment, I held her against me while telling her all the things I should have said when I first met her and realized that I loved her. I held her like that for a few moments, afraid that if I let her go, I'd lose this perfect moment. She was warm. She smelled like wildflowers. She smelled like happiness. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt comfortable and content. Part 3. I don't know when I drifted off, but I do remember waking up. In the love-drunk excitement of the previous night, I didn't think once about Ian or the consequences of my decision. I only thought about Jessica, and I forgot that she was his girlfriend. What I did last night was a beautiful mistake. I convinced her to cheat on him with me. I needed to tell him before the truth came out. I needed him to understand how I felt. I got up from the ground and stretched. Jessica was gone. I assumed that she'd gone back to her sleeping role in the middle of the night. I walked over to Ian, who was just waking up. He rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and asked me if I'd stayed up all night. The words bled out of me, and once they started, I couldn't stop. I don't know what happened, man. We were just talking one moment and then the next. Jeez, I didn't mean for it to happen. You know I love you, man. I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. It just happened, and no, I can't take it back. Jessica's cry of surprise cut me off before I could go any further. Both me and Ian turned to the sound of her distress, and we knew instantly what had happened. The backpacks with our compass, food, and water had been stolen. It knew. Don't you see, goddammit, it knew. We could identify it without a backpack, and it couldn't shape its skin to take the appearance of one, so it stole them away from us. Now the next time it wormed its way into our group, we wouldn't be any the wiser. Jessica and I never talked that night. Jessica had never left my brother's sight that night. They had zipped their sleeping rolls together. She didn't open up to me about her worries, and I never actually kissed her. I poured my heart out to a thing wearing Jessica's skin while it was in my arms. I confessed my truest feelings to an ersatz entity masquerading as a person, and I felt sick. The others woke up quickly after hearing Jessica screaming. We quickly searched around the area, hoping to find some scrap of food or indication of where our stuff had been taken to. We found nothing. It was long gone. We had no food, no water, and no hope. No way of telling when one of those things was hijacking our heads and pretending to be a part of our group so it could distract us. With our compass gone, we had no means of following a set direction, hoping to pick the trail back up. In short, we were screwed with a capital S. Oliver demanded to know what I was doing last night. He wanted to know how I could be so careless as to fall asleep when I should have been watching over them and our gear. I lied and told him that someone had come around in the middle of the night to relieve me from my shift. I didn't mention that it was one of those things impersonating Jessica. I couldn't bear to look either my brother or his girlfriend in the eyes at that point. Oliver started to yell, but stopped when he saw I was on the verge of tears. I don't know if it was mercy or disgust that caused him to stop. Doesn't matter either way. We gathered up the only thing they hadn't taken in the night, our sleeping rolls, and continued walking. The hike without water or the prospect of food was unbearable. We were already exhausted, and the realization that we were soon going to be starving and have dehydration only served to sap more of our energy. Within a few hours, my mouth felt gummy and dry. Although we were still under the canopy of leaves, the temperature was still in the high 80s and low 90s. It didn't take long for dehydration to set in. I kept licking my lips in an attempt to keep them moist, but I could feel them beginning to crack as my saliva began to dry up. As we walked, Oliver picked up his pace and caught up with me. I looked over at him and knew without him saying anything that another one of those things had joined our group. He whispered, "Don't look directly at it. Just keep it in the corner of your eyes. I think that's how it messes with your mind. It'd explain why you remember that guy last night, but the rest of us can't. You saw him, but the rest of us didn't. Now don't get close, just keep it in the corner of your eyes. It's been trailing us for about a half hour now. I think it just wants to watch and follow us." I pretended to be cracking my neck and looked at the tag-along in my peripheral vision. It trailed behind us by about a dozen feet. In its resting state, its facial features appeared staticky. I could make out eyes and a nose, but it was constantly shifting and rippling like bubbling plastic. At this point, we were too tired to even bother chasing it off. We just kept walking and hoped it wouldn't try to join the group. It seemed content to keep its distance and keep us in its line of sight. It followed us for about 2 miles before it broke off towards the trees with a shambling, awkward gait. We were too tired to even try and set up a shift system. We just huddled together in an attempt to convince ourselves that we were safer when we were closer together. But every time one of us got comfortable enough to drift off, those things would start making a noise. The noises started off as high-pitched yips, whose sounds seemed to travel for miles. As the night drew on, they grew more aggressive. I remember one time I was drifting off hearing the grating rasp of my name. Evan. The things weren't just following us, they were learning. They were perfecting their mimicry. The thought disturbed me more than the idea of them out there watching us in the darkness. I mean, how long would it take them to become more human than human? What would they do once they were capable of walking amongst people again? I drifted off to sleep with that thought beating around in my head, like a man trapped inside a wall. We got up on Tuesday morning and left without a word. At this point, there was nothing left to say. Some of us had been awake all night without any food or water. The constant stress had completely worn us down. We continued hiking in the same direction we'd been going in, with the false hope that we'd come across someone. In the end, our hike looked more like a death march. My feet were covered in blisters that had ruptured and plastered the soles of my feet to my socks. Every step felt like I was tearing open the wounds a bit more. In an attempt to take my mind off the discomfort, I focused on my brother, who was walking in front of me. He wasn't as much walking as he was limping forward. He stopped using his walking stick and was dragging it behind him like it was a broken limb. I watched as he stepped over a rock and the walking stick slipped out of his hands. He kept dragging himself forward as if nothing had happened. He didn't even register it falling out of his hand. It was at that point I knew that something was wrong. I knew that my brother wasn't my brother anymore. I quickly picked up his stick as I passed it. Amy went to call out to ask him if he was all right, but I shushed her. I was so sure that one of those things had replaced him and was now leading us deeper into the woods. I realized that I would only have one chance at this. The instant it knew that we knew, it would try and run away. All it would take was one good swing at the back of its head and we'd be able to take out one of those things. Well, the stick had a bit of a weight to it. 5 or 6 pounds, enough to crack open a skull if it was swung hard enough. I began walking faster while trying to avoid the underbrush that might give away my approach. The thing wearing my brother's skin continued limping forward as I drew closer. I waited until I was within swinging distance before raising the stick above my head. My heart was beating in my chest and my palms were so sweaty that it felt like the stick would slide right out of my hands. I kept on moving forwards, completely unaware of what I was about to do to it. I whispered, "I'm sorry. just before I swung the walking stick down with all my strength. Ian turned to face me as he mumbled groggily, "Sorry for what?" My muscles locked and I stopped mid-swing, and the stick stopped just inches away from his face. He blinked in surprise before muttering, "Evan, what's wrong?" His voice sounded distant and empty, like he was in between a waking and sleep state. It was then that I knew the extent of his condition. He was pale and looked like the slightest breeze would blow him over. He wasn't one of those things. He was just delirious from dehydration, sleep deprivation, and starvation. The walking stick fell out of my hands and bounced on the ground next to us. I dragged my tongue across my lips, and it felt like I was licking sandpaper. I whimpered, "Geez, Ian, I thought you were one of those things. Oh God, I'm so sorry." He didn't react to my apology. He just turned around and continued walking in the direction we were going in. Amy just watched everything unfold numbly before she started following him. Oliver shook his head sadly, but he didn't look any better. His eyes were glazed and his lips were cracked and red from rubbing at them. I watched my brother shambling forward, and it reminded me of one of those old voodoo movies where someone is just put into a trance and forced to work until they die from exhaustion. His mouth hung open, and he moved like he was being dragged along on puppet strings. I picked up the walking stick and began to follow them. I wondered how much longer he had left in him, and what any of us could do if he just fell over and stopped walking. I wondered how much longer any of us had. I don't know how long we walked. Everything melted together in a muddled malaise at the time. I remember losing my footing and tripping several times, but I barely felt it. The third time, I didn't even realize I was laying on the ground until Jessica stepped on me as she was passing by. There was no apology. She was too far gone to recognize what she'd stepped on. I dragged myself to my feet and felt lightheaded, but continued putting one foot in front of the other. The fifth time I fell, I wondered if it would have been better just to lay down and wait to die. An excited yawp behind me from one of those things drove me to my feet. It wasn't until we bumped into the sign for Little Bear Canyon that I realized how close we were to salvation. The post for Little Bear Canyon also had a branching sign that pointed in the direction of TJ Corral, which was only a few miles from where we'd started at the Gila Cliff Dwellings, if we walked along Route 15. Ian was heading in the right direction. We were almost home free. In my excitement, I began calling to the others to let them know that the end was near. I looked around at me and shouted, "Jessica, Ian, Oliver, Heather, Amy, I know where we need to..." The words died on my lips as I counted the names and realized it wasn't over yet. The others kept moving as if they hadn't heard me talking. The imposter shuffled alongside us, and for once it was easy to identify. I don't know whether or not they'd let down their guard after seeing our conditions, but this one was obvious. She moved slowly, but her movements didn't convey her exhaustion. Everyone else was sweating and looked like the walking dead, but she was fine. I waited for her to get close enough to follow the trail the others were going down before I raised Ian's walking stick and growled, "Turn around right fucking now. I can see you." She turned around slowly, and I felt my heart skip a beat. She looked almost exactly like Jessica, except for a brown tinge to her hair. She could have been her twin. I knew what it was planning before it even opened its mouth and asked, "What are you doing, Evan?" "Don't call me that," I winced. "What are you rambling about? Please move out of the way. We're almost safe from those things." "I know what you are." Heather turned white at the realization, and she began speaking quickly. "I'm not one of those things. Please, Evan, you have to remember, there were 6 of us. Those things want us to think there were only 5, so they can take one of us out without the others caring. Those things don't want us all. They only want the weakest one. Please, let's go before they "Shut up," I snapped. I raised the walking stick in my hand and brandished it at her. "Think about it, Evan. Do I move like one of those things? Do I even speak like them? That should be enough to prove I'm human." "No, Ian's my brother. Jessica's his girlfriend." "I'm your girlfriend. I sat on your lap on the car ride. Please, don't kill me, Evan. I love you. Don't you remember? Evan, I love you. I lowered the stick that was in my hand as memories bombarded me. I'd met her one night when my brother forced me to go out to a club with him. Heather had been sitting at the bar all night drinking. It wasn't until she tried to stand up and fell into my arms that we actually talked. I remembered lazy Sundays in bed watching cheesy B sci-fi movies. I remembered holding her close to me and making love and hearing her whisper sweet nothings into my ear. I remembered our life together. I rasped, "Heather, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." She cooed. "Evan, it's not your fault." She went to touch me and I sprang back like I'd been bitten by a snake. The instant I heard those words, I knocked. The stick caught her unaware in the side of her face. But her jaw give way under the sudden force of my attack. She burbled through broken teeth. The second strike dented her temple as the temporal bone shattered. She kept trying to talk, but it was too late and too much damage had been done. That door was shut to me now. I kept swinging the walking stick down on her head until it splintered and snapped. I looked up from her twitching body and saw my brother watching me in horror. "Heather, oh my God!" I spoke through gritted teeth and regarded him with red-rimmed eyes. "Come on, we have to go." He went to keep talking, but I walked past him. I didn't want to explain it to him. He eventually ran ahead, invigorated with the prospect of finding rescue on the road. I looked behind me one last time. The last thing I saw was one of those things dragging away Heather's corpse. It looked emaciated and half mad with starvation. At that very moment, I wasn't afraid of the thing. I just felt pity. Whether or not it forced that emotion on me, I'll never know. I turned away and caught up with the others on Route 15. We were on the road for about 15 minutes before we managed to flag down a car, and an ambulance was called for us. Well, the doctor said that our exposure to the elements, combined with our starvation and dehydration, triggered the auditory and visual hallucinations we'd experienced. It's the typical response you'd be given after hearing our half-dead ramblings about creatures warping their flesh and our memories to drive us to the brink of death so they could prey on us when we were at our weakest. We spent a week there while receiving treatments, recounting our horrific experiences and then subsequent psych evaluations before we were released. I tried to talk to the others about it. Ian and Jessica refused to talk with me. I don't really know Oliver or Amy, so that's off the table too. They just want to forget. But I can't forget. Well, here's the thing. I still remember Nadia asking me to help her find her lighter. I recall staying up late and talking with her by the campfire while she smoked like a chimney. I can recite Jerry's terrible puns that he'd make about almost everything, and Lucas's determination at hiking this trail while slowly succumbing to the effects of his multiple sclerosis. I can recall whispering sweet nothings to Jessica under the glow of the full moon. I can still envision that moment as clear as day, even months later. I know the conversation we had word for word. I can remember the feeling of her skin against mine and the smell of her hair as I pressed myself against it when I reached for it that one true moment of connectivity. I remember Heather pleading and begging me not to kill her. Now, despite writing all this months later, I can see all of those things clearly. Sometimes late at night, I can even remember driving up the Gila National Park with Heather sitting in my lap, playfully grinding against me and telling me how fun our hike was going to be. Sometimes I think about that memory more than I should. Since I can't talk to my brother or Jessica about this, I had to find some other outlet. I guess I'm writing all this for that one reason, catharsis. In the end, I keep wondering if what I did was right. Did I make the right choice? I want you to read this and tell me that I had no other option, that the risk of one of them escaping into the city forced my hand. But I know that's not the case. I could have walked away or tried to scare her off, but I didn't. What kind of person can look into someone's eyes, remember all the things they did and the life they had, and do what I did? Who can have all those memories and end everything so callously? Doesn't matter if none of it was real, because in that moment, it was, to me. Who can look at someone and feel such love for them before you kill them? The answer to that question is simple now that I ask myself aloud. But I just don't like the answer. Vicksburg by Austin D.R. Chapter 1. The town was abuzz with the whirring of cars and the ceaseless hustling and bustling of busybodies so obsessed with their routines that they would unknowingly let life pass them by and miss out on the simple things. Several people chatted loudly as they crossed the streets on their way to work. Suffocating black smoke from many a car's exhaust pipe permeated the air and polluted the sky with clouds of smog. Rats scavenged for food and left trails of wet, goopy trash along the walking paths. The unsanitary conditions would lead to the spread of several pestilences, leading to the town's hospitals becoming clogged. A clap of thunder eviscerated the sound barrier, accompanied by the steady drizzle of rain. I watched the town fade from view as I rode the public bus. As any who was familiar with this form of transportation could attest to, the bus was congested to the brim with several passengers, all with varying characters and hygiene. Due to the tight, cramped build in the bus's structure, many passengers were sandwiched together, some packed together like a can of sardines, and they certainly smelled like it too. Greasy, slimy sweat rolled down the forehead of a large, burly guy I was forced to sit by. He'd sweated so much his white, buttoned shirt was see-through. His foul, decaying stench wrinkled my nostrils, with the urge to gag becoming harder to suppress. His whiskers were wild and unkempt, his eyes so wide they could have burst from his sockets. When he stared at me, the best I could do was offer a light-hearted smile. "Well, good afternoon to you, sir." He stared at me for a minute, not saying anything. His discolored eyes peered in opposite directions as if he was staring into infinity. After nothing of note happened between us, I tried to focus on my trip. I held the handle of my briefcase with some hesitation. The town soon became a dot in my eye before sinking into the inky abyss. This was it. It was really it. I turned my attention back to the ride. To think this was the last time I'd be seeing this town. Sure, it had one school, a single grocery store, and a police station, but it had its charms, such as its park on the western side of the town. I gazed at the man beside me again, but he was still in his own little world. I tapped the handle a few times as I watched the passengers start to settle down into their seats. Those who could not depend on their hand grips, well, they stood there, shaking slightly any time the bus made a stop. Even then it felt like the bus wasn't even close to thinning out, instead becoming more inflated by the minute. Every now and then I looked up to see passengers trickling out. I didn't know how they could handle being nearly suffocated by the claustrophobic crowds. It reminded me of the droves of people at auditoriums watching ball games. The air became hotter from the body heat and warm breath radiating from the travelers. During the third stop, the heavy-set gentleman finally left his seat and walked away without as much as saying goodbye. Not that I was intending on saying goodbye anyway, but it would have been thoughtful. A trace of the fat man's putrid stench lingered in the air. I sighed to myself and plopped the briefcase on the seat. My fingers strummed the side as a twinge of doubt arose within me. It'll be a couple of hours until I reach my destination. 3 hours, give or take. The town did not have the best reputation, but my company insisted that I move there. "Pardon me, my good sir. Would you mind if I sat there?" I shook my head clean of the thoughts and looked up. There stood a well-dressed man wearing beige slacks and an overcoat. He wore a matching top hat on his head and boasted a thin, brown moustache that twirled at the ends. He withdrew his hat and tipped it to me in a friendly gesture. "Oh, sure, be my guest." The gent elegantly found purchase on the seat and watched me fiddle around with my luggage. After what seemed like an eternity of him staring me down, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card. "My name is Jacques Skinner, private investigator." He placed the card in my hand, and I flicked it around to analyze it. "Well, seems legit. What are you trying to solve?" Jacques smiled at me, revealing a small piece between his two front teeth. Ever heard of a man named Walter Bean? Walter Bean. The name sounded familiar. I rummaged through my mind for a few seconds. He was the owner of a furniture company, right? Aye, 68-year-old Walter Bean, a CEO and a family man. He was the owner of a huge corporation. He was last seen 2 weeks ago. He apparently was looking to expand his business in the town of Vicksburg. But, well, after he made the business trip, he never came back. Which is where I come in. My eyes widened. Vicksburg? That's where I'm going, as a matter of fact. Jacques' eyebrow arched, his interest peaked. Really? That is quite the coincidence. He withdrew a picture of Walter Bean. He was a slightly portly figure with a balding head and spindly moustache. Walter wore a red 3XL cotton shirt and khaki pants. He had a half grin on his face as he stood in front of his office. Jacques rubbed his chin and probed me further. Why are you going to Vicksburg, if you don't mind me asking? A business trip, I explained. They said it was non-negotiable. Perhaps, but I am certain you've heard of the story behind the town and why it's held with such disdain. I shook my head. I know that the town is worn down and practically a ghost town, but I'm not afraid of any ghost stories. He laughed. Okay, then. Well, legend goes that during the 1770s, the town of Vicksburg was once a prosperous place with friendly faces everywhere. People openly shared with each other, and no one was left without. Real utopia, I guess is the term. I quietly listened to the private investigator as he further lectured me on the town's folklore. Well, that was until there was a certain woman who grew up with nothing before marrying into a noble family. She was beloved by her husband, but she had one fear that's universal to everyone regardless of their status, and the fear of death. So she conducted research into the dark practices, meeting an undead cultist who indoctrinated her into the worship of the gods of old. She summoned a demon from the bowels of the earth to grant her the gift of eternal beauty and life. The demon fulfilled that wish, but it required sacrifices from the living. Sacrifices? Gods of old? I stammered. Are you telling the story, good man? Jack asked me, somewhat annoyed but still smiling. Sorry, just got entrenched in the story. Do go on. One by one, the woman led her family into the mouth of hell, starting with the servants and then her loving husband and their 4 kids. From there, more and more of the townspeople disappeared into thin air, and in their place, well, let's just say the demons are the residents now. He chuckled to himself and returned the photo of Walter to his pocket. Oh, that's what I've heard. My mind was awash with a surge of thoughts. My, that is quite the story. You're saying that Walter went to Vicksburg? Him and 3 more gentlemen as well. Either it was because they wanted to expand their businesses, or they were selected almost at random. The previous 3 had vanished for a few months now. It's peculiar that they would all leave without telling their families that they should not expect them back any time soon. We talked a bit more about the missing cases. Much like Walter, some of the men missing were the heads of different corporations, ranging from furniture to oil. They were all gradually lured to Vicksburg through whatever means and were never heard from again. Eventually, the bus made a stop and the private investigator got off. He waved goodbye to me, tipping his hat once more. Do keep me updated if you find anything peculiar in Vicksburg. My eyes were glued on the man as he left the bus and continued his way without looking back. After he'd left, the bus resumed its designation. Chapter 2. The tires on the bus screeched to a halt, signifying that it was my time to get off. I collected my things and exited the vehicle. The nauseous fumes spewing from the exhaust pipe wafted in my face and nearly knocked the air from my lungs as it sped off, leaving me alone. One look around at Vicksburg, and I could tell why its reputation was not the best. The town was an ancient relic of the past. Dozens of houses were dilapidated with speckles of paint chipping away and flaking off like dandruff. The walls had caved in over time, to the point where the roofs were barely hanging on by a thread. I passed by buildings that were scorched down to the wood and abandoned to the wrath of Mother Nature. Moss grew along the sides of brick walls and rats ran rampant through the streets. The cold, crisp air smacked me on the nape of my neck, sending a shiver up my spine. The grass in the city was totally dead and blackened. Any scarce shrubs and trees that there were, and they were winding and fatally emaciated. I'd arrived at Vicksburg at around 4 in the morning, so my best initiative was to find a place to stay. I walked down an isolated road with the slightest sense I was being watched from afar, and any time I tried looking in the opposite direction, it would scuttle off. It was hard to believe that anyone would live here, let alone that Walter and the other gentlemen would be compelled to come. Columns held buildings up, but the slightest poke would make them crumble. Mud and other debris were flung on the windows, obscuring me from peering inside, almost as if they wanted it that way. The state of disrepair also extended to the roads and walking paths with spindly cracks scattered throughout. I travelled down the square of the town, seeing several small businesses denoting some of the products you could expect to purchase, like canned goods or bread. The light posts were faintly lit, reminding me of twilight, with the sun's rays partially illuminating the atmosphere, a perfect combination wherein it was neither too dark nor completely lit. In the middle of the square was a large fountain with a sculpture of a scantily clad woman, calling to mind those Roman statues. Despite being made from stone, her long locks of hair flowed in the wind. Murky, tarry water poured down from a pot she was holding. Upon closer look, tiny hints of algae coated the rocky surface, adding to its prehistoric state. After taking in the whole picture of the fountain's condition, my attention became directed towards the hotel. As with the other structures, the hotel had seen better days, having long since fallen into a decrepit state of disarray. Its name rubbed off the sign to where I could vaguely make out a few letters. The paint peeled away from the foundation, giving it a hideous, ghastly appearance. Newspapers padded the windows, and nasty smoke drifted from the chimney. There were a few areas where the bricks were punched out and smashed on the ground below. With nowhere else to turn to, I entered the establishment. The scent of decay slammed into my face like a sledgehammer to the head. So much dust accumulated on the furniture and doors that it shot up in the air. The musky debris made my nose recoil in disgust. Coughing, I scanned the surroundings. 2 chairs with bare backs lined a shaggy rug that had become green from the moss residing on it. Photos decked the walls, some dating back to the 1800s, and eroded over time due to the improper maintenance. I approached the service desk, spotting a book on the desk. Heavy layers of dust coated the surface. I looked past the desk, noticing copious amounts of cobwebs dangling from the bookshelves and ceiling. A small bell lay beside the journal. Weighing my options again, I tentatively pressed the knob. Nothing. I tapped my fingers on my briefcase and waited a few seconds. I rang the bell again after 10 seconds had passed. Still no one stirred from the faint sound. I stared at my wristwatch, seeing that it was almost 5. Perhaps if I was more assertive, I could somehow convince a citizen of this town to offer me a place to stay. As I turned to leave, I finally heard a commotion.
Good morning, sir.
I turned to the desk again, my eyes beholding a peculiar man. Strange, I didn't hear him walk behind the service desk, and judging by how sudden his appearance was, he'd practically manifested. He could have been hiding on the floor the whole time. I internally understood people's apprehension for the physical features of a Vicksburg citizen. This gentleman was pale, deathly so. His skin lacked any ounce of pigmentation, looking more like a reanimated corpse. Not one speck of hair was on his slick body, with his cranium briefly illuminated under the faint light. His eyes, however, were the most jarring attribute. They were as black as a starless sky, darker than the pitch-black void. I was uncertain if it was a result of his pupils expanding to collect more light, or if his irises were naturally black. He seemed to notice my repulsion of his peepers, so he tried offering me a smile. Except it was the furthest thing from a smile, more a poor man's replication of one. He possessed a row of sharp, jagged teeth that, when parted, only revealed a jet of inky nothingness at the back of his throat. He spoke in a low, guttural voice, somehow sounding distant and yet still close. He arched his head to the side, analyzing the subtlest of my movements. "Welcome to our town, sir." There was nothing more that I wanted than to end the conversation and get the hell out of Dodge, but where would I go? I tried to muster up as much politeness as I could. "Hey, I'd like a room." The enigmatic man's eyes widened more. I felt that he was staring into the recesses of my soul and got his jollies from frightening me. "Very good, sir." His long skeletal fingers groped the journal. "Well, how much is a room for the night?" I asked. "Oh, no need for payment," he chuckled. Purple goo glistened on his yellow-stained teeth and landed on the desk. "You don't have to pay a single dime." "Really? That'd be great." Not once during our discussion did the gentleman ever blink. If anything, he'd freeze up temporarily and just glare at me like a record that has the issue of skipping before resuming. His body moved in a wobbly, drunken stupor, with his knees buckling and jerking. Did he even have a pair of feet hidden behind the counter? Well, he pushed the journal to me and handed me a pen. Once I opened the book, I immediately knew something was amiss. Walter Bean? The employee froze in place. "Ah, yes. He visited this same hotel. We like to keep their names and addresses for documentation." "Well, it says he signed this exactly 2 weeks ago." "We like to record the names and addresses of our guests," the man replied, somewhat forcefully. His tone sank to a deeper octave. "Well, Walter's been missing for a long time. This was the last place he was seen, isn't it?" The man leaned in, looking at me with his black holes for eyes. "I assure you that you have nothing to worry about. For all intents and purposes, we're not allowed to discuss our client's private information." Damn, he wasn't budging. I could argue with him for hours and hours, but I was not mentally willing to do so. I shrugged and sighed in defeat. "So, just sign my name and address, right?" "Very good, sir." I jotted down my signature and address and closed the book. Well, this town is something else. "Whatever do you mean?" he asked. "It's just in a state of total disrepair. Hardly any birds or other animals aside from rats, and everything just seems so bleak." He chuckled again, hearing my complaints. "You sound like you're starving for some entertainment." Without saying anything further, he disappeared almost as quickly as he'd manifested. Before I could question him on his sudden interest, he returned holding a flyer in his hand. "Tell me, you alone?" "Alone? Why is that crucial information?" Normally I would be put off by that sort of invasive question, but, well, I decided to play along. "I am single, yes." The gentleman's smile widened, purple fluid rolling down his mouth in thick layers. Perhaps this would be of interest to you." He handed me the flyer. I skimmed the piece of paper, and the words, "Vicksburg's annual mix and mingle." My eyebrows stretched in surprise. A dating game. He jerked a bit, giving a firm grip on his arm. His frail fingers reached out for the flyer in hopes of reclaiming it, but his grip tightened, forcing him to reel back. There was visible hurt on his face, as if he was conflicted with revealing the occasion to me. He hissed under his breath before the internal conflict resolved itself. "It's a tradition we have here in our little town." "And, is it the only thing to do here? Nothing like a movie theater or anything that grandiose?" You didn't know what I was blabbering on about. Oh, never mind, I'll keep this in mind. The tips of the employee's mouth curled then. You won't regret this. Well, with nothing more to say, he pulled the key off the hook and dropped it on my open palm. Enjoy your stay, sir. Nodding, I started the long ascent up the stairs. As I left, I heard a shrill voice whispering maliciously at the man. It was so low, however, that I could not make out what the heated words were. Come to think of it, I didn't recall seeing anyone else at the hotel. The wooden planks creaked under my feet when I approached my room. More dust settled along the rails of the stairs. While I waited for the man, I did sneak a peek at one photo that said the hotel was established 3 centuries ago. Well, you'd think that during all that time, they'd consider some renovations. From the erosion over the centuries, large gaping holes formed on the floorboards, threatening to swallow up any poor sap unaware of their presence. Room 3. I opened the door, and in doing so, several cockroaches scuttered out. Peeping inside, it was a relieving sight to see that the room, even though it was old, looked presentable. I settled down on the bed's cover, not daring to even see what was underneath. Later that day, once I'd settled in, I'd have to meet up to discuss my business with the higher-ups. While thinking about it, my eyes wandered back to the flyer and Walter's disappearance. I knew damn well that the employee was lying through his mustard teeth. Thinking back, not only was Walter's name and address listed, but so were the other men that Jacques had reported missing. All of them arrived at the hotel at some point, only they'd never checked out. Right, I'll contact the private eye soon. As I settled into my bed, my mind continued to whir at the thought of partaking in the annual dating game. Why was the man so insistent on me attending it? Chapter 3. I let my curiosity about the dating game compel me to consider attending it. I didn't expect much to come from it. It should be fun. Besides, I could learn more about the town's history and potentially gather some information pertaining to Walter's disappearance. The meetup was in a large auditorium wherein several of Vicksburg's populace were present. My curiosity slowly subsided when I noticed how every resident was draped in brown cloaks obscuring their pale, hairless bodies, save for their hands. Their eyes were downcast and, much like the employee of the hotel prior, they moved in a drunken stupor with their legs knocking and wobbling about, reminding me of those trapeze walks at the circus. It didn't help that the lights were faint, making me bump into things. The raspy, gruff drones of the residents reverberated through the room, sounding pained and congested the further they lumbered along. They didn't pay much attention to me when I first entered the establishment, making me wonder why the man running the service desk was so insistent on me attending. The building was also unbelievably cold, but that was to be expected from the town's ruined state. More rationally, I considered leaving then and there, but I ended up going along with the dating game. I sat at a table when the first option reared up. It was a rather short woman who leered at me with those same unblinking eyes of coal. I giggled nervously in an attempt to break the ice. So, what are you interested in? She opened her mouth, letting a low groan leave her lips. Ooze dripped from them. Okay, could I ask you a question? The pale woman was too invested in a huge, hairy cockroach scuttering across the table. Before my eyes, she grabbed it with her open palm and took a huge chomp out of the insect. Her canines ripped clean through the bug, her lips parting as she stretched the roach between her teeth as if the roach was string cheese. Oh, thanks for the introduction, but I have to, respectfully decline. Next. Another woman sat down, this time being taller with a hint of moisture behind her eyes. Yeah, I was, wondering if you know a man named Walter Bean. He went missing in your town weeks ago. The woman leaned in, grinning. A mysterious fluid gushed from her lips when a huge smile spread across her face. Her eyeless sockets bore holes into my body. Her body trembled with pangs of hunger. He's here, with us, all one within our God. God? What are you? Before I could probe her further, the woman lunged at me and pinned me to the ground. Her jaws unhinged, and I peered into the depths of her mouth. Slimy drool dangled from the ceiling down to the base of her tongue. In desperation, I tried retaliating, but the taller woman was stronger. Soon you, too, will become part of our God. I closed my eyes, fully expecting her to bite me in the neck. However, a few solid seconds passed. I reopened my eyes, seeing that the woman reeled herself back and clutched her head. Can't hurt. A shrill voice crawled out from the bowels of her gut, making her upper body spasm. No, yes, no, get out of my head. Her head bobbed back and forth, with her fingers tightening around her head. I became petrified, but now that she was distracted, I took the opportunity to knock her off. With one swift push, the woman fell to her side, still in an eternal battle with herself. A mob of Vicksburg residents staggered forward and dragged the woman away. Gasping on the floor, I slowly collected myself. Coming here was a mistake. I was only here because of a business trip, so it was in my best interest to pursue it. Now, maybe once I get that done, I could leave this godforsaken town in the dust. Oh my, that was quite the experience, wasn't it? My eyes leered at a young woman. What a sight she was. Blue eyes, a flawlessly silky skin complexion, a low-cut red dress and ample bosom, and a dark blonde bob cut with matching piercings. She strolled over to me and knelt at my eye level. Welcome to Vicksburg, sweetheart. She extended a hand to me, and with a little consideration for my own safety, I took her hand. Her palm was warm and cozy to the touch. There was something about her that seemed, soothing. We haven't had that many visitors to this town in a while. Pray tell, why are you here? My mind became a total blur. I came here for business. Yeah, that's it. The woman laughed to herself. Dimples formed at the corners of her mouth, only accentuating her wholesomeness. I got up from the ground, my eyes wandering back to this strange woman. You seem, normal. Normal? Well, I certainly hope so, darling. It's just that the other residents here are somewhat peculiar. That was my reaction to when I first moved here. She looked me over, a smile widening. My name is Narcissa Witter. Judging by your appearance, you must be the one who was invited to Vicksburg. Yeah, my boss had connections in this town and had me come as a representative. Funny enough, I never met him in person. Narcissa nodded. My God, I felt further ensnared by this mystery woman. If I had to wager why that was, it was definitely her voice. Her lipstick popped like precious rubies. Her plump, luscious lips were like hot butter with how flawlessly she spoke. I slowly forgot the horror of being nearly ingested by a psychotic woman. The more she talked, the more I felt myself falling deeper for her. You, happened to be invited to attend this occasion? Why, yeah, I thought it'd be pretty interesting. Vicksburg has this as a tradition. Well, I was honestly getting bored out of my mind, my dear, but you made this more fun. I looked down and twiddled my thumbs. So, you willing to try this date out? I would love that. We ended up talking for hours, far past the time limit. Narcissa was truly an interesting individual. She had an extensive knowledge of the town and other subject matter. I found myself further wowed by her effortless recounting of historical events, providing me with such an elaborate description, I was wondering if she'd witnessed any herself. She claimed to have family back in some city and was intending on returning there after the business trip. That infectious laugh of hers was music to my ears. I shared some of my personal information with her, explaining the extent of my job and my interests. I have to admit that my eyes had a mind of their own. I gazed at her cleavage any time she bent. She propped her head on her hand and lovingly stared at me. Now, come to think of it, there was something I was curious about. Have you heard of a man named Walter Bean? Narcissa squinted, her eyes shut. Well, the name does ring a bell. Why do you ask? It's just that he's been missing for quite some time. Perhaps he left the town and just neglected to inform anyone. I shrugged. I suppose so. I'm sorry to spring something that deep on you. It's quite all right. After all, I'm sure you heard of the rumors permeating the town. I nodded. Yeah, a private investigator told me of them. Narcissa frowned. It's just so terrible, isn't it? That a loving wife and mother would sacrifice her own family for eternal youth? Yeah, but it's a story. We shouldn't fret over some myth. A smile cancelled out her frown. You're right. Shall we take this discussion elsewhere? Chapter 4. As my time in Vicksburg progressed, I met up with Narcissa more and more. Her cutesy yet mature, witty personality was her signature charm. She filled me in on the origins of the myth again with such vividness, it was like she was actually there. She expounded on Jacques' relaying of information, explaining how, according to ancient cults, there was once several inhuman, otherworldly gods that made the earth into a festering cesspool and were worshipped by the cultists until the day the primal threats were sealed away in ancient tombs, left to rot. That is, till the day they'll arise and treat mankind as an insignificant bug. Well, as you know, there was once a woman who was so afraid of death, she called on the gods to preserve her youth and gain eternal life. She wandered down into the depths of the earth to beseech the Old One. And the god she sought out was none other than the pale beast, the god of the labyrinth, Ihort. But as with anything, there was a price to be paid. I quietly listened. Who could have fathomed that there were so many hidden societies dedicated to worshipping these unknowable, eldritch beings, and for what cause? Are they obsessed with bringing about the apocalypse and practice their perverse religions to summon them? What ancient books did they have in their possession? And, you say that this woman found an undead cultist who gave her the secrets to communing with Ihort? What did she have to do? Oh, reprehensible acts that went against natural law and would damn her very soul to the darkest pits of hell. She knew the secrets of where the gods of old lay dead and where they would once more trek. She uncovered the truth behind our own reality and peeked her eyes into infinity. With the assistance of that pale beast, she could even travel to dimensions without the need of ever leaving home. Life itself was an illusion, a cheap replica of what eternity felt like. My heart sank into the depths of my body. Cults, an ancient primal god. My mind connected the dots back to when I first took part in that dating game. All the citizens of Vicksburg wore cloaks, something I should have correlated long ago. That woman insisting that Walter and the others were all one in the god she worshipped. I'd become ensnared in a tangle of webs. Screw everything. I had to get out. Narcissa stared at me with her blue eyes reflecting her concern. What's wrong, darling? I just feel a little flushed. You don't have to lie to me. I can sense how uneasy you are about the cults I mentioned. But don't worry, there's nothing to be concerned about. I'm sure you noticed that the townspeople wear those garments. It's not what you think. Well then, why do they wear them? Well, it's rather simple. The people of Vicksburg have a weakness for sunlight. Now tell me, have you ever seen any of them walking about during the day? I thought back to my previous encounters with the townspeople. And truth be told, they were able to freely shuffle around in the auditorium because of an artificial light. Even the hotel I resided in was dimly lit. Well then, what about that woman who attacked me? She seemed conflicted about it. It's like almost two halves were fighting each other. Perhaps a temporary bout of madness, Narcissa casually explained. Besides, Vicksburg has hardly any outsiders visit their town. She was probably just overcome with astonishment. I didn't say anything to further rebut her. Look, I'm unsure if I should stay here. Narcissa's eyes lowered in a crestfallen fashion. It nearly pained me to see her upset. Is that so? I've spent about 2 weeks here, and I was never able to find the people who wanted to do business with me. To be completely frank, I believe it was all just a ruse to make me look like a fool. The blonde woman paused and thought intensely on her next move. If that is the truth, then I might as well explain why I'm really here. My curiosity piqued in that moment. What happened? To tell you the truth, my life back home isn't good. I have a husband who's a raging alcoholic who would beat me unconscious every day he came back from work. If it wasn't me, he'd go after our 2 kids. One day he beat me up so badly She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks. I was in the hospital for 3 months, and after that I somehow managed to escape his wrath and ran away from home. She covered her eyes with her hands and bitterly wept into them. Her breathing became staggered the more she let her raw emotions loose. I know I shouldn't have abandoned my kids with their father. It was a moment of weakness. I didn't know what to say in that instant. Quite the bombshell I was handed. Without thinking heavily on it, I gently embraced her. She was startled at first, but she slowly melted into the hug, clasping my back. I'm so sorry to hear that. You shouldn't be. It's not your problem to deal with, she replied. Look, I'm planning on leaving Vicksburg tomorrow. If it's fine with you, would you care to accompany me? Her eyes widened in surprise. Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden on you. No, you won't bother me at all. It's the least I could do. A smile poked through. Okay, it's a deal. Chapter 5. It was approaching night time when I returned to the hotel. I approached the counter and hit the bell. Sir, I'm informing you that I'll be leaving first thing tomorrow. Much like the first time I arrived, the employee did not come. I tapped the dusty counter with my fingers in irritation. Sir, let's not do this again. I allowed some time to pass, but the man did not show up. Is that how you're going to treat your customer? Refusing to wait any longer, I climbed over the counter, nearly getting tangled in cobwebs. Ugh, how can anyone live in this kind of condition? From the way the lights were dimly flickering, I was forced to collect as much light into my eyes as I could. As expected, the room was in total disrepair. Books were lying in piles beside the bookshelves. Webs coated furniture and tickled my nose. I fought the urge to sneeze. The floorboards creaked and moaned under my weight. The further I went, the more the light diluted into beams. Sir, come out now. This is getting ridiculous. Finally, my eyes settled on a heap of clothes. He couldn't, could he? The thought of the peculiar man parading around in his birthday suit was burned into my mind. A ruffling of the clothes knocked me out of my train of thought, though. I slowly advanced towards the clothes, with it becoming evident that the man had evaporated. Before I could theorize what had happened to him, dozens of small white objects erupted from the clothing, scuttering around like cockroaches dispersing when a light's turned on. What the... The millions of spidery, bloated beings crawled on the walls and up my clothes. In a panic, I scrambled over the counter, the wet squelches of crushed younglings making me squeamish. Debris rained down from the ceiling as a sudden earthquake surged. I could have sworn I heard something writhing in agony from the bowels of the earth. The foundation of the hotel shook incessantly and groaned with the death of each abomination, suggesting a possible link between the two. The stairs finally dissolved and exploded into splinters. I covered my head as best I could, but the monstrous arachnids just kept pursuing. The wet, gooey bodies of the monsters popped under my feet like overripe grapes. I had the sinking feeling of some of the residue getting between my toes. Eldritch ooze clung to the soles of my shoes, restricting my movement. Each time I tried to move, the runny, stringy substance came into contact with the floor and formed a strong adhesive. Those legs. Oh, so many legs. Hundreds of thousands of marbles with an unnatural number of appendages crawling on my body. They crept their way up my pant legs with some slithering beneath the fabric. No matter how many times I tried to bat them off, these abominations kept on latching onto my body. The hairs on my body rose on end from the impression that I was being licked by 1,000 million spiders. My skin felt violated from the endless probing and pinching. I grabbed my ankles and continued my mad attempt to free myself. Help! A faint, weak murmur caught my attention. I darted my eyes back and forth in search of the scream of urgency, seeing no one until I directed my sight to a hideous event. The white pulsating blobs with stalks for legs linked the innumerable limbs together in huge, grotesque lines, and did the most harrowing of things any sensible man could anticipate. They started to move in a single motion, multiplying and expanding until, well, something ghastly was taking form. The gunky paste on the soles of my shoes finally gave way. However, when combined with the invasive pests crawling all over me and making me squirm, I fell on my rear. The monsters kept feeding into the growing figure. Much like a well-oiled machine, the beasts kept feeding themselves into each other. Help! With all the beasts working together, a human shape came into being. They moved in a swimming motion, shifting their icky legs to a side to mimic the gesture of limbs. The dread welled up in the pit of my stomach and crawled up my throat. The insidious spawn multiplied further, breaking apart and restructuring themselves until a vaguely humanoid shape took form. However, its skin became melty and ran like a lit wax candle. My eyes became bloodshot. It was the employee, except now it was clear to me that what I was speaking to in my entire stay in Vicksburg were millions of blotches who hardly could pass themselves off as human. The piercing assaulted my eardrums, calling to mind a nail scratching a chalkboard. The creature, moved about miserably, dragging its upper body along the floor. Its mouth hung agape, with a hazed wheeze spewing out. Almost every slight movement brought unending suffering for it, it seemed. The humanoid anomaly held out its hand to me, gesturing in a hopeful fashion. It jerked itself closer to me, moaning and shuffling just to stay in its form a bit longer. I became unfrozen temporarily, horrified at the unholy display which violated the laws of nature that every being under the sun had to follow. The hotel continued to collapse around us, shaking me out of my terror. I slowly backed away from the monster, but it somehow sensed what I was intending to do and clawed its way towards me. It hissed at me, destroying the illusion it was desperately clinging on to. Before it could strike, a plank fell from the collapsing ceiling and pinned it down. It let out a high-pitched, hellish shriek, but there was no way I was going to humor it. I rushed to the door, the wet squelches of the broodlings I'd killed echoing behind me. Chapter 6. I succeeded in escaping the hotel as it suffered its final death throes and went up in a heap of primeval dust. As it cleared, all that was left of the establishment was a pile of bricks and smoking debris. My mind was still wrapped around the surreality of the situation. The pale, hairless appearance of the man, all the residents of the town's bizarre skin complexions. Now that woman fought herself when she was deciding whether or not to eat me. None of them were humans, but rather arachnid, hideous carbon copies that struggled to be approachable. I shook my head. Whatever the case, I had to leave Vicksburg, but not before taking Narcissa with me. After all, I couldn't live with myself if I knowingly abandoned someone in this wretched town. High-pitched screams filled the empty air, alerting me. Crap, more of the neighbors were coming, obviously because they heard the collapse of the old building. Without much contemplation, I hid in the alleyway and bit my lower lip. Their gravelly, guttural voices were like waterlogged bodies, with their constant squelching and damp noises. Cautiously, I peered from a corner of an abandoned store, seeing 4 cloaked Vicksburg citizens staggering on their legs. If only I could decipher what they were saying to each other, only for curiosity's sake. As they chatted, one of the hooded figures stopped and slipped his hood from his bald head. I heard what sounded like mandibles clanging on each other when I noticed he was getting closer. I backed further into the alleyway out of concern that they'd seen me. The hissing reached its apex with his long, spidely fingers scraping the edge of the building. I shimmied down to get as close to the ground as I could. Even though it was nighttime, the creature's glare burned holes in the back of my head. He entered the alley, sliding his appendages in the dark void. We were so close I could smell his pungent breath. Eventually something else caught his attention, and he left with his group. I wiped the sweat off my brow and sighed in relief. With them distracted, I could make my escape attempt. However, before I could continue the next phase of my plan, a feminine voice echoed through the streets. My eyes widened in shock. Narcissa. I peeped from behind the dilapidated wall and almost doubled over. Narcissa was captured by the Vicksburg anomalies with her distress. Her arms flailed around with the feeble hope of striking one of her threats. I had to do something, but what could I do? I rummaged through my mind for a solution, but Narcissa's screams were making me anxious. Swallowing my pride, I sprinted towards the assembly and balled my fists. I swung wildly in the air, smashing my knuckles over and over into their gelatinous mass, but it felt like I was punching raw meat. The more I railed against them, the more the Vicksburg anomalies gradually lost their corporeal forms and disintegrated, exploding into millions of skittering spiders. Narcissa glared in absolute horror upon seeing these humanoid beings dissolve into pulsating, rampant marbles on thousands of stalks. What is this? There was no time to explain. I grabbed her wrist and urged her to move. Her warm, silky hand felt amazing to grope, but I threw that thought to the back of my mind. My heart galloped behind my chest as my breathing became taxing. My lungs wheezed and buckled beneath my ribcage. The sounds of thousands of bony, fleshless legs scraping the ground reverberated onto the streets. Everyone in this town, all those monstrosities linked together, mimicking the basic movements of the human body. Narcissa shared an equal look of dread. What should we do? She grasped my arm and squeezed up against it. The soft breasts felt amazing around my wedged arm, driving me crazy. Her warm breath sent a chill down my spine. Even when she was terrified, that statuesque build and her intense glare made her impeccable. We have to find a place to hide and wait for things to blow over. The blonde woman scratched her head. If we're looking for refuge, I know just the place. Chapter 7. I let Narcissa lead the way, happy that she knew the layouts of the town. Throughout the whole secretive walk, we did not speak a word to each other. The air around us became thick enough to slice with a knife. After a few seconds, I tried to break the ice. So, we've been traveling for a while, haven't we? She did not respond. Well, that night was especially breathtaking. The moon was in close proximity to the earth, resembling a polished pearl. Narcissa used the light radiating from the celestial body and led me further away from the town and into the rough thickets of the woods. The forest was completely bereft of noise. No owl screeched in the night. If there were crickets, they were deathly silent. Narcissa gently tugged my arm deeper in the neck of the woods until we stopped at a cave. At the entrance, Narcissa withdrew a torch and lit it. She then beckoned me inside. I wasn't thrilled to be entering into a dreary, claustrophobic area, but those cultists could still be on our track. Soaking in my fears, I entered the cold and dreary cave. A pungent, repulsive smell, that of decaying matter, drifted from the entrance. The odor of ages long past was not lost on me. I stared at Narcissa, wondering how she was holding up. She was unbothered. Let's go. We don't have much time to waste. She flicked her finger through her bangs before leading me further into the maw of the cave. It was silent aside from our footsteps and the soft dripping of moisture in the distance. Water sparkled on the stalactites like beads of diamonds and trickled into an underground pool. I confused the stalagmites for razor-jagged teeth from the erosion over the years. Behind us, the entrance disappeared into the void as shadows encased us. The wind whistled into the cave, adding to the ambience. If I was being accurate in my description, I could have sworn I heard the cavern breathe, and the cavernous walls appeared to twist and contract like a living creature. Oh, my paranoia flared. I wanted nothing more than to leave, but the exit was nowhere to be seen. Besides, if I left on my own volition, I would have become stranded and made to wander in the dark until the end of time. My breathing hazed, and goosebumps flared on the surface of my skin. Fluid fell on my shoulders from the stalactites, making me wriggle in displeasure. Eventually, Narcissa led me to an opening. "What is this place?" Well, Narcissa didn't reply, merely goading me in with her finger. Seeing no reason to doubt her, I entered the area. This secret location was decked in heavy sheets of cobwebs which dangled down from the ceiling. It was also inexplicably damp, and the disgusting, putrid scent of decay was even more prominent. My eyes settled on discarded skeletons, with their wrists restrained in chains protruding from the walls. They'd likely been down here for centuries, judging from their aged, worn features. Whatever they'd witnessed, they'd died in total fright. Their lower jaws were stretched as far as humanly possible to where they became unhinged. Over the years, the only thing keeping them suspended was the webbing. Well, the more I soaked in my surroundings, the more I became aware of the purpose the location served. There was a huge slab situated in front of a bottomless pit at the base of the cave. Arms made from wedges of stone stretched from the structure. Dried blood and viscera were stained on the flat surface of the instrument. I desperately looked at Narcissa with the hope she was as confused as I was. However, instead of a detection of fear, Narcissa's facial expression shifted to one that was apathetic to the whole thing. I watched her stride over and light a crucible underneath the stone slab. The gaseous, nauseating flames wafted in the air, smelling like rotten flesh and scorched ashes. Her once beautiful, hypnotizing eyes transitioned to a pale blue, as if her energy was being sucked from her body. Hundreds of years ago, the great Old One, Ihort, first manifested in the town of Vicksburg. This cave is the exact place that, according to folktales, a woman who came from an impoverished upbringing made a deal to the gods for eternal beauty and youth. Narcissa, what are you suggesting? I felt a wet, slick object grasp my shoulders. The cultists' voices gurgled and wheezed. Before I could try to fight back, two of the worshippers lifted me off the ground and directed me to the stone slab. Oh, I kicked and thrashed. I flailed my arms around. Nothing happened. They tossed me on the hard surface with such force I felt my spine buckle. My wrists were tightly tied to the arms of the instrument, the ropes eating into my tender flesh. Narcissa stared at me for a few seconds. She was no longer the woman I thought I'd known for the duration of my stay in Vicksburg. She strolled over, kneeling and staring at the primitive skeletons. And once again, my god will have a sacrifice. Sacrifice? Oh, the word bounced around in my head. Everything was happening so fast. You know an awful lot about that myth. She laughed. Well, yes. After all, how old do you think I am? I strained against the tight binds, to no avail. The town and its conditions. It was always you. Hundreds of years ago, the town of Vicksburg was once a prosperous area. It was a massive trading town where corn, pumpkins, and fabric, you name it, were traded and sold. I was born to a poor family, but I was considered the fairest of the town. Of those, a nobleman took a liking. After meeting him on several nights, he popped the question to me, and I said yes. I grunted under my breath. Why did you betray your own family? What do you think is the one fear that all humans share? Narcissa asked, though it was clear she did not care what my answer was. Death. Humans had but several accomplishments when they crawled out from the festering primordial cesspool. And yet, despite all those achievements, the one thing that they failed to conquer was death. She casually pried the skull off a skeleton and flicked her fingers through the jawbones. I knew that one day I would die, but I couldn't live with that harsh truth. Not someone who's as gorgeous as me. Narcissa tossed the skull aside and spoke to the cultists. You think that you saved me from them earlier? Don't you realize that the people of Vicksburg follow my commands? So then, that means Walter... Her eyebrow perked. Is dead? That should be obvious. I thought you of all people would be more intuitive. He was but a sacrifice, one I lured. That explains why I was told to come here. So, the dating game? Narcissa shushed me. A ruse, sweetheart. How else was I supposed to meet up with you? The cultists backed away from me and collapsed on their knees in a praying stance. My fear of death became so great, I called on the god of the labyrinth to grant me eternity, which he did. However, I neglected the fact that Ihord himself had his own terms. He asked me to foster his brood. Not thinking much about it, I accepted. They're squirming around within me as we speak, in a larval state. But once I realized his brood would eat their way out of my body, it was then that the truth became clear. He'd merely extended my lifespan, but in order to avoid missing his quota, I had to resort to drastic measures. Your husband and kids. But how could you? Necessary sacrifices. After them, I did the same process to the rest of the town. Some would go missing for weeks, locked away in my lair, with their bodies being dissolved and eaten from the inside out. Curiously, the brooding acquired memories of their hosts, sometimes effortlessly mimicking their voices. I saw that happen with a young 32-year-old I lured. The broodling demonstrated mannerisms he himself had. Perhaps when a host perishes, they're never truly gone, but exist as bodiless spirits attached to the broodling. Well, it made a considerable amount of sense, despite the bizarre nature of it. The hotel worker and the woman I'd met at the dating game. Their essences were still present within these anomalies, and they were crying for release. Narcissa cleared her throat and walked over to caress my cheek. Shame. You were really nice. She chuckled again then. Eventually, in my haste to stay alive, I accidentally destroyed the town. I tried any solution I could think of, like introducing interbreeding among the broodling, but after a few centuries, that was no longer enough. What are you getting out of helping an old one? You know the risks these unspeakable monstrosities have for the earth. The god of the labyrinth shall once again be free to rule this world. I intend on becoming a Lowell royalty once the ancient crypts are opened. I already have served Ihord faithfully as his high priestess for centuries. I am not some lowly, weak, insignificant human. I've ascended to godhood, and I believe I deserve my dues. Wouldn't you? My eyebrows furrowed. After I comforted you about the abuse you suffered, you believed that story. Narcissa's chuckling became louder and echoed throughout the cave. Gods, you're as pathetic as all those other humans who I tricked into loving me. I snarled at that. You'll never get away with this. I'll escape and tell Jacques all about what I've learned. This town will be demolished faster than you could even blink. Narcissa's grin stretched around her ears now. Need I remind you that the broodling follow my commands because of the spawn that is swimming in my stomach? Through Ihord, I have eyes all over the scope of this world. Let's just say he has paid a very special visit. I wanted to say more, perhaps call Narcissa every name under the sun. But I froze when a series of tremors shook the cave to its very core. Narcissa maniacally snickered at me, relishing in how utterly defenseless I was. Now, time for you to make the choice so many before you have. My fear bubbled from the deepest regions of my stomach, but there was no one present who could help me. The ceiling quaked as a series of cracks formed. Stalactites of varying sizes crumbled and fell around me. It was as if legions of freight trains had collided all at once in a massive collision of biblical proportions. Chapter 8. And then I caught a glimpse of those legs. Hundreds of thousands of rigid, bony legs rode out of the hole, scraping and clawing the ground for leverage. Larger than a public bus. Beads of sweat trickled down my forehead, the color draining from my face. Eyes upon eyes where such features should not reasonably be. Keepers so horridly massive they eclipsed the eyes of the largest known species on this planet. Its pale gelatinous mass bubbled to the surface, resembling a disgusting, pus-filled pimple, and its abdomen. Good God, its abdomen. It was shaped like some overgrown olive, with eyes bulging all over every surface of its great body. The god of the labyrinth towered over me with his unholy glory. My blood ran cold, and I was at a loss for words. My heart moved in an abnormal, hypnotizing motion, swaying back and forth with nary a bone to be found on its gelatinous build. I immediately understood what Narcissa meant when she said she had eyes throughout the world. The multi-legged abomination's labyrinth expanded across the whole globe, granting it the illusion of being omnipresent. At any time, some hapless sap could end up lost in the cavernous walls and encountered this old one. Oh, it unnerved me how easy it was. Narcissa cackled, her smile becoming more twisted. I have done what you have requested of me, my god. Please bestow me with your blessings. Iort shifted its many eyeballs to what I assume was its chest. It spoke with the same gravelly, gurgled voice its offspring shared. Its voice was not what I was expecting for a creature as huge as a boulder. Its tone was distant, bizarrely cordial. Despite its terror, the pale god was patient, unspeakably so. Oh, I'm afraid you misunderstand, mortal. Your time as my high priest has reached an unfortunate end. Narcissa's eyes widened in horror. But, my lord, have I not been faithfully serving you for centuries? I've provided you with the best sacrifices to meet your quota. You are such an insignificant, incompetent waste of filth. Something shifted within Ihort's indescribable mass, and stretched and twisted indefinitely into itself, forming a colossal fist. You have forgotten your place, human. You may have an extended life in comparison to the rest of your kind, but you also forget who it is who can take it away. Narcissa clasped her hands together in deep prayer. No, Ihort, please. I'm sorry for speaking out of turn. Please, let me serve you for eternity. I'll kill whoever I have to in order to... Just... Without warning, Narcissa kneeled forward, grimacing. Her eyes bulged upon the realization of what was happening to her. Dozens of Ihort's brood squirmed and wriggled from within her body, ruffling her outer skin. She clutched her midsection between her arms, letting rip a haunting, agony-filled moan. Yet no matter how much she begged, her desperation fell on deaf ears. Narcissa's face contorted into a twisted scowl, with ludicrous tears streaming down. No, my lord. Her deathly cough started to choke her out. Gagging profusely, streams of white, spindly critters wriggled free. Her eyes disintegrated as the insidious creatures chewed their way out from within her. Her sobs of pain transitioned to wet squelches and the tearing of flesh. The brood slashed their way through her lungs and turned them to slush along with her other vital organs. Narcissa's once glamorous, flawless skin bubbled and popped as thousands of spawn made a mad dash. Even her skeleton dissolved into more nutrients for the hungry infants. Within 3 agonizing moments, Narcissa was gone. All that was left of her were her favorite dress and her ear piercings. I struggled to breathe after bearing witness to what Narcissa had suffered. Well, faced the horrific reality that I was now alone with her murderer. Ihort's arm twisted and shifted, moving from one side of his body to the other, as if he was contemplating when an appropriate time was to drop its mass on me. Its myriad eyes settled on me. Even without the Old One talking, I knew how lowly he thought of me. "Fear not, my dear human," it whispered. Once more its voice sounded soothing, but I realized that it was not because of true benevolence, but rather manipulation. "I shall give you an offer. I'm certain that you will not choose poorly." Everything that I thought I knew disappeared in an instant. We as humans were so convinced of our place in the universe, but there existed things, horrible reality-breaking things, things that no one of sound mind should fathom or search for, and they truly existed. We are but a speck of dust in the grand scheme of things, and the Old One's thirst for release. "You will gestate my brood now. Otherwise I have no further use for you." My lips were dry. I didn't know what I should say at that moment. My options were limited considerably. Should I agree and allow Ihort to gestate me with his offspring? I didn't think I'd be getting off that easily, judging by what happened to Narcissa. But seeing that titanic fist hovering above me, swinging back and forth like a pendulum, well, it was also a situation I wanted to avoid at all costs. "Unless you wish to become my chosen." Chosen? My mind worked into overdrive to comprehend the offer. That must have been what Narcissa was. If so, that entails sacrificing the life of someone else for my own safety. Well, it was not only an irredeemable act, but also very cowardly. After mulling it over, I came to a decision. I think I know what I want.
And so once again, we reach the end of tonight's podcast. My thanks as always to the authors of those wonderful stories, and to you for taking the time to listen. Now, I'd ask one small favor of you. Wherever you get your podcast from, please write a few nice words and leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the podcast. That's it for this week, but I'll be back again same time, same place, and I do so hope you'll join me once more. Until next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.